Hey there, friend. Tonight, we're not meeting a philosopher, a conqueror, or a forgotten queen. We're meeting a plant, a green, stubborn, and quietly legendary companion that's been walking beside humanity for thousands of years. Sometimes helping, sometimes confusing, sometimes just watching us make fools of ourselves. Before we dive in, let's set the tone. If you're new here, welcome to Candlelit History, where we drift through the past by candlelight, slowly, gently, one breath at a time. And if you've been here before, welcome back. You already know the ritual. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a small fan or a little white noise, something soft enough to blur the edges of the day. If you have a candle nearby, light it. Watch how the flame trembles a little, how the wax begins to pool. That small light is our time machine tonight. And as always, before we start wondering, if this kind of calm, strange history helps you drift off or makes your mind slow down after a long day, go ahead and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy it. That's the deal here. No rush, no pressure. If you want, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. There's something oddly comforting about knowing that, as you listen, maybe half asleep, maybe wrapped in a blanket, someone else, halfway across the world, is doing the same. Now, take a slow breath, because tonight's story starts not with smoke, but with silence. A silence older than writing, older than farming, older than history itself. We're going back about 7,000 years, to a cold morning somewhere in what's now Siberia. The air bites, the frost clings to grass that hasn't yet learned the word civilization, and a group of foragers huddles near a small fire. They've gathered dried herbs, seeds and twigs, whatever will burn without choking them. And somewhere in that pile, though no one realizes it yet, is cannabis. When the first spark catches, the smoke rises in thick grey ribbons. The tribe leans in for warmth, breathing in the faint sweetness of burning stalks. Someone exhales and pauses. The world shifts, just slightly. The firelight seems warmer, the shadows deeper, the stars above impossibly large. No one has words for it yet. Not high, not stoned, not even vision, just wonder. You can almost picture it, a woman with frost in her hair, laughing softly, not knowing why. A man staring into the embers, convinced they're whispering something to him. The first accidental poets of the human race. Archaeologists would later find cannabis seeds in burial sites from this time, tucked beside beads, tools, or bits of pottery. It wasn't decoration, it was devotion. Someone, thousands of years before written language, decided that this plant mattered enough to take it into eternity. Maybe it was meant as food for the journey, or as a charm to keep the spirit company. Or maybe, and this is the version I like to imagine, they simply thought, if there's another world waiting, I want this to come with me. The earliest humans didn't yet use cannabis for pleasure. It was survival. The fibers made ropes and nets. The seeds were food, full of oil and protein. You could spin it, wear it, build with it. It was nature's Swiss Army knife, adaptable, durable, quietly essential. And then one day, someone realized it could change the mind. Maybe that was an accident. Maybe not. Maybe they threw too much on the fire. Maybe the wind carried the smoke. But once that happened, once that spark lit up the imagination, everything changed. Think about it. Every great leap humanity's ever made started with curiosity and a mistake. Fire, fermentation, love, laughter, and this. A curious species discovering that the world looked different through a thin veil of smoke. It's easy to romanticize it now, of course, but to them it must have been terrifying. The ground breathing, time stretching, sound bending. They might have thought the gods had stepped closer, or that they'd accidentally inhaled the soul of the fire itself. And in a way, they had, because this is the beginning of something intimate and strange, humanity's first conversation with a plant. From that moment on, cannabis begins to follow us everywhere, across valleys and rivers, over mountains and seas. It slips into our rituals, our medicines, our poetry, and our paranoia. We cultivate it, worship it, outlaw it, and rediscover it again, over and over, century after century, never quite agreeing on what it is. A cure, a curse, a companion. Tonight's journey will follow that trail of smoke, through time, from the misty plains of ancient China, where emperors tested it in search of immortality, to the mountains of India, where yogis drank it as a sacred gift of Shiva, to the roaring streets of Rome, where its fibers held together the sails of conquest. We'll wander through tombs where it was buried, with kings, temples where it was burned as incense, and laboratories where it was dissected by curious men in white coats. And somewhere in all of that, between the sacred and the scandalous, you'll see what it really was, not just a plant, but a mirror, a reflection of how humans deal with comfort, with pain, and with the endless, restless need to feel something more. But before we race ahead, let's linger here, in the flicker of that first fire. The foragers are drifting to sleep now, their bellies full of seeds, their tools drying by the flames. Above them, the night is huge, stars sharp as pinpricks. One of them laughs again, softly, as though remembering a dream. The smoke curls upward and disappears into the sky. And just like that, the story begins. A story of warmth, of wonder, of humanity's oldest love-hate relationship. A story we'll follow through temples, tents, and taverns, through medicine, mysticism, and morality, through 5,000 years of confusion and curiosity. So settle in, let your shoulders drop. The night's just starting, and the fire's burning low. You can almost smell it. Sweet, sharp, ancient. Welcome to Candlelit history. Tonight we begin with smoke. You wake in the half-light before dawn. The fire's gone to embers, glowing faintly through the thin chill of early morning. Around you the camp still sleeps. A few quiet breaths, a cough from somewhere near the hides, the rustle of dried grass shifting under a fur blanket. You stretch, bones cracking, and smell it, that faint, sweet smoke still clinging to the air from last night's fire. You don't have words for it, not yet. There's no word for burning hemp, no word for euphoria, or mood, or even relaxation. There's just that strange feeling, light and slow, like the ground isn't entirely solid under your feet. You stand looking at the sky as it fades from black to indigo, and for a moment you feel as if you've woken inside a painting. You don't know that in a few thousand years, someone will call this plant Cannabis sativa. You just know it grows near the rivers, tall and fibrous, with seeds you can crush for oil and stalks you can strip into rope. It's useful, practical, but last night it became something else, something you can't quite name. You crouch near the ashes. The wind is low, carrying frost. A few unburned stalks are left where the fire once was. You pick one up, rub the soot from its edge, and watch the powder stain your fingertips black. It still smells faintly of the smoke, earthy, warm, a little bitter. You take another slow breath. For the first time in your life, the air itself seems alive. Somewhere nearby, your tribe's gatherers are waking. There are tasks waiting, fishing nets to check, hides to scrape, stone tools to sharpen before the sun climbs too high. But this morning, something's changed. The world feels softer around the edges. Even the usual morning arguments over who ate too much, who forgot to cover the fire, seem less sharp, more like distant echoes. No one says it out loud, but everyone remembers what happened last night. They all felt it. The sudden laughter, the quiet peace that followed. One of the older women swore she heard the ancestors humming in the smoke. A hunter said he saw shapes, not frightening, not gods exactly, but something vast, something watching. And when the fire finally died down, everyone slept more deeply than they could remember. You gather your tools for the day, slinging the rough rope you made from hemp fibers over your shoulder. It scratches a little, coarse and uneven, but it holds. It always holds. You've used it to tie bundles of fish, to drag branches, to stitch together the frame of your shelter. Without realizing it, you're surrounded by the same plant that filled your lungs last night. You wear it, eat from it, sleep beside it, and now somehow, it seems to be part of you. The day unfolds in a rhythm older than history. You walk to the river, knees cold in the current. You rinse the ashes from your hands, and watch the water turn grey, streaked with light. On the opposite bank, the tall stalks of hemp sway in the breeze, their leaves whispering like gossiping ghosts. You pluck a few seeds from a dry pod, roll them between your fingers, and taste them. Nutty, sharp, familiar. It's the same plant in every form: food, fiber, fuel, and now something that touches the mind. Back at camp, someone is already grinding seeds into paste on a flat stone. Another is twisting fiber into thread. The air fills with the hum of quiet work, scraping, tapping, the small sounds of survival. But beneath it all, there's something new, a shared awareness that the smoke from last night wasn't ordinary. Humans have always been like this, curious to the point of trouble. We choose strange leaves, we boil roots, we sniff powders that make the world hum, not because we need to, but because we can't stand not knowing what might happen. And here in this frozen valley, your people have just joined that tradition. The sun climbs higher, a light fog burns away from the ground, and for a moment the world feels still. The horizon stretches endlessly, broken only by the dark line of forest in the distance. You can hear the distant yip of wolves, the call of a crane, the drip of melting frost from the hides above your shelter. It's an ordinary day, except that it isn't. Something about last night's smoke lingers, even in the bright light. The world feels connected, the fire to the water, the seed to the wind, your breath to the air around you. You don't know it yet, but this tiny discovery, this quiet, accidental communion, will ripple across millennia. Thousands of years later, people will grind this same plant into oils and ointments, spin it into fabric, brew it into tea. They'll write laws to control it, songs to praise it, and entire wars to argue over it. But here now, none of that exists. There's just the earth beneath your feet, and the smoke that somehow still feels sacred. You tie a small bundle of dried hemp to your belt, not for luck exactly, but for memory. Maybe one night you'll burn it again, just to see what happens. Maybe it'll help with pain, or sleep, or simply remind you that for a few minutes, the world felt perfect. By dusk, the tribe gathers again. The sky turns violet, the air cooling fast. The fire is lit once more, and for a heartbeat you hesitate before throwing in the kindling. You know what happened last night. You wonder, if the smoke really did open a door, where does it lead? The first sparks leap up, orange and wild. You add the twigs, the dried hemp stalks, the smallest bundle of leaves. The flames catch, and soon the air smells the same as it did before, sweet, smoky, ancient. The same laugh ripples through the group. The same warmth seeps into the bones. The same question hangs in the air, unspoken but shared by all. What if this is the way the gods speak? not with thunder or miracles, but with smoke. You close your eyes, the fire hums softly, the wind tugs at your hair, and the stars return one by one, sharp and endless above you. This is the first ritual. No temples, no priests, no language, just fire, breath, and the strange calm of knowing that the world can change with a single spark. And so it begins, the oldest story never written down. The story of a plant that would one day cross continents, survive empires, and sit quietly in the corner of every civilization, waiting for us to remember. But for now it's just you, the fire, and the smoke curling toward the stars. A soft signal rising from the Stone Age saying, "We've found something." The snow has gone. The valley lies open now, raw and quiet beneath the sun. You've seen many seasons turn in this place. Frost to mud, mud to grass, grass to gold. But this one feels different. The air smells older, heavier somehow, as if the earth is remembering something. Today is not for hunting or weaving or boiling roots. Today is for burial. The oldest woman in your tribe, the one who used to hum to the fire when storms rolled in, has died. There's no word for death here, not exactly. Just a sense that she's gone somewhere farther than the horizon, somewhere the wind knows, but you don't. The camp is quiet. Children stay back, hands tucked into their furs. The hunters stand in a wide half circle, eyes lowered. You and the others have been digging since dawn, breaking the frozen ground with flat stones until your palms sting. The hole is shallow because the soil is stubborn, but it's enough. When the time comes, her body is carried gently on a woven mat of reeds and hemp fiber, the same material that tied together your shelters, your nets, your days. The hemp has softened with age and smoke, and it smells faintly of earth and river water. She lies wrapped in hides, face turned toward the east. Someone places a bone carving near her hand. Another lays a small stone knife by her side. And then, without speaking, a young woman steps forward with a pouch of seeds. They are small, black, and shining. Hemp seeds gathered last summer, dried carefully near the fire. You know the ones, you've eaten them, pressed them for oil, even traded them once for salt. But this time, they're not for food, they're for memory. She scatters the seeds across the woman's chest, a soft patter against the hide. They fall into the folds of her clothing, into her hair, into the small hollows around her fingers. A few bounce onto the ground, rolling into the cracks of the earth. The wind lifts one and carries it away. It's a simple gesture, but it feels enormous. No one says it out loud, yet everyone understands. The seeds will sleep with her, and maybe in the next season they'll grow, green threads reaching upward, marking her place. Life rising from death. You stand there watching and realize something quietly profound. This isn't just grief, it's connection. The same plant that fed you, clothed you, warmed your fires, is now being asked to do one more thing, to remember. The burial ends with silence, the kind that stretches until it fills the lungs. Someone starts to cover the grave with earth. Another hums, low and steady, a sound without melody or words, just tone deep as the heartbeat. When it's done, you all step back. The mound looks small against the valley, but the seeds beneath it make it feel eternal. That night, the fire burns low again. No one talks much. The smoke curls upward, lazy and silver, rising into a sky filled with stars. It looks almost the same as the smoke from that first night, when you burned the stalks, but tonight, it carries something heavier. You watch it drift upward, and think about the woman's seeds buried in the cold soil. Some part of you wonders if the smoke and the seeds are the same thing, one rising, one sinking, both trying to return to whatever waits above the stars. Over the next days, the camp begins to move again. The hunters leave at dawn. The gatherers head to the riverbanks, and children chase each other through the tall grass. But the grave remains. You pass it often on your way to fetch water, to cut reeds, to follow tracks in the mud. And each time it feels less like a warning and more like a promise. By midsummer, the first green shoots appear, thin, reaching, stubborn. You kneel and brush the soil from them, recognizing the serrated leaves. Hemp. The seeds have taken root. The woman who sang to the fire has returned as a field. You touch the stem, rough beneath your fingers, and it feels alive. Not just alive, purposeful. It will grow taller each day until it sways with the wind, whispering like her old voice. When the breeze passes through the leaves, it sounds almost like words. You can't understand them, but they calm you all the same. Soon others begin to plant hemp deliberately, not just near graves, but around shelters, near the river, along the trails where the soil stays wet. You don't call it farming, not yet, but something close to it, tending, coaxing, trusting the earth to remember your hands. The tribe starts to store seeds in clay pots, marking the first hint of agriculture. The hemp fields spread like memories stitched into the land. You start to notice how much the plant gives: rope, cloth, oil, smoke, and now meaning. Every part of it finds a use, even in death. When the elders speak to the young, they tell the story of the first burial, how the smoke rose, and the seeds grew, and the woman's spirit lingered in the rustle of the leaves. How life and death were never enemies, only parts of the same slow breath. At night, sitting by the fire, you sometimes crush a seed between your fingers and think about how strange it is that something so small could carry the weight of everything you are. You don't have words for philosophy or religion. You just have the feeling that this plant, this cycle, is the closest thing you've ever seen to eternity. In centuries to come, archaeologists will find graves like this one, skeletons curled beneath layers of soil, surrounded by fragments of pottery and the faint trace of cannabis pollen. They'll write papers about ritual use, about symbolism and belief, but they'll never quite capture what it felt like. The cold air, the scent of soil, the quiet awe of watching life sprout from death. As the season turns again, the valley hums with color. The hemp stands tall now, shoulder high and swaying like a green tide. When the wind moves through it, it sounds like breathing, the whole earth inhaling and exhaling slowly, endlessly. Sometimes, when the fire burns low, you swear you see shapes moving in the smoke. The old woman's face, maybe, or just your own reflection flickering in the dark. You know she's not gone. She's in the fields, in the rope that ties your shelter, in the fibers that hold your tools, in the seeds that fill your pouch. You carry her with you every day, woven into the small details of survival. That's the real story of this plant, not rebellion, not escape, but remembrance. From the moment humans first scattered those seeds into the ground, cannabis became a thread between worlds, a root in the soil and a wisp in the sky. And as you lie down beside the fire that night, the smoke curling upward once again, you realize that what you've created isn't just a ritual. It's the first memory written, not in ink, but in scent and seed and flame. The valley fades. Thousands of years pass, like a long exhale, and when the fog clears, the air is warm again, heavier, sweeter. You're standing now on a different soil, under the watchful eye of mountains, veined with mist. The land is China, long before it called itself that, a cradle of invention where the rivers still rule and the people bow more to the rhythm of the seasons than to kings. Here, in this lush green world, the hemp plant has already found its home. It stretches high from the fields, its stalks thick and fibrous, leaves trembling in the early wind. The people have learned to tame it, twist it, spin it. In their hands, hemp becomes rope, cloth, nets, and paper. The quiet architecture of civilization. But this isn't where the story pauses. It's where it deepens. Because one man, half myth and half memory, decides that knowing how to use the plant isn't enough. He wants to know why it works, why some leaves heal and others harm, why one seed feeds and another poisons, why the earth seems to hide both medicine and death in the same stalk. His name is Shen Nung, the divine farmer. You can picture him now, broad-shouldered, sun-browned, walking through a field with a basket slung across his back, chewing on leaves as he goes. Every step is an experiment, every bite a gamble. He is both ruler and researcher, doctor and daredevil. His people say that his skin is translucent, that you can see the herbs moving through his veins as he tests them, studying their effects on the body in real time. It's the sort of story only ancient minds could invent, half miracle, half metaphor. But the truth behind it is simple, curiosity again. The same impulse that made those first foragers toss a stalk into the fire now drives Shen Nung to test the earth itself. He collects hundreds of herbs and roots, arranging them carefully in woven trays. Some will heal fever, some will soothe pain, others will kill him if he's not careful. His assistants stand at a distance, ready with water and prayers, waiting for the results. When he tastes cannabis, may in his tongue, the effect is gentle at first, warmth in the chest, a softening of thought. The world's sharp edges round into calm curves. He notes it down carefully, maying, warms the body, frees the spirit, quiets the 100 ailments. It's one of the first scientific observations in human history, a moment when sensation turns into data, when wonder becomes study. From that day, cannabis enters Chinese medicine, not as indulgence, but as balance. The yin and the yang, the cool and the hot, the soft and the strong, are the body's tides, and May is the wind that steadies them. The fields of hemp expand beyond usefulness now. Not just rope and cloth, but medicine. The farmers dry the leaves, crush the seeds, and mix them with honey and vinegar. The healers brew them into teas that calm pain and ease rheumatism. The physicians grind the resin into powders, labeling each with calligraphy that curves like flowing smoke. In the villages, the women wear hemp garments, so soft they whisper when they move. The children sleep on hemp mats, woven tight as spider webs. The fishermen cast hemp nets into the river, and when they pull them up, they catch both fish and the quiet blessing of a plant that refuses to be ordinary. And yet, Shen Nung doesn't stop. He records every experiment in a book that will echo through centuries. The Pen Tiers Aun Ching, the classic of herbal medicine. In it, cannabis earns its place among ginseng, ginger, and tea. He describes it as neutral, a word that in his world means more than mild. It means harmony, a middle way between sickness and strength, intoxication and clarity. You can almost imagine him at dusk, sitting on a low stool, writing by lamplight, his fingers stained green from the crushed leaves, his lips murmuring notes to himself, eases the heart, calms the mind, too much clouds the spirit. He might smile at that, realizing he's discovered not just a medicine but a mirror, something that reflects the user's own balance or chaos. Outside his window, the air hums with the sound of night, insects. Farmers are finishing their meals. The fields shimmer under moonlight, rows of hemp stretching out like ripples on water. In the distance, temple bells begin to ring. Centuries will pass, but his work will endure. The doctors of later dynasties, Han Tang's song, will copy his words onto silk scrolls. They'll add their own discoveries, how the seeds cool the body's heat, how the flowers ease cramps and melancholy, how the smoke itself can open blocked channels of breath. And through it all, the tone remains the same, calm, methodical, respectful. They never call it vice, they call it medicine. In this world, there are no moral panics, no laws against leaves. There is only the belief that nature is both teacher and test. You learn by listening, by chewing, tasting, burning, breathing. The Taoists will later take this idea further. They'll say that cannabis clears the mind enough to glimpse the spirit world, that its smoke helps bridge the gap between the mortal and the eternal. But for now, in Shen Nung's age, the plant remains humble, a farmer's friend, a healer's ally, a scholar's curiosity. By the riverbanks, you can see the hemp fields moving like waves. Workers cut the stalks in bundles, tie them with twine, and set them to dry in the sun. The scent is earthy and sharp, clinging to their skin and hair. Children chase each other between the rows, laughing, unaware that they're running through history. When night falls, Shen Nung sits again by his lamp. He holds a handful of dried hemp leaves, crushes them gently, and watches the powder drift through his fingers. This, he murmurs, is the plant that teaches peace, and somewhere far away, perhaps in a cave in the western mountains, perhaps in a dream, the smoke from another fire rises, the same grey curl that's followed humanity since the Stone Age. It joins the mist, disappears into the stars, and becomes part of the great breathing of the world. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it whisper back to him. You didn't discover me, Shen Nung, you just remembered. Morning mist curls through the lowlands, like a living thing. The rivers of ancient China move slowly, heavy with silt and history, feeding the flat green plains, where hemp now rules the landscape. From a distance, the fields shimmer like silk, endless rows of tall, thin stalks that catch the wind and murmur softly to each other. This is the age when hemp is no longer a curiosity or a healer's secret. It's become civilization's quiet backbone. The plant that once grew wild on the riverbanks now grows everywhere, near temples, in gardens, behind fishermen's huts, beside the road that leads to the capital. In this era, every village knows hemp's rhythm, planting in spring, cutting in autumn, drying and beating through the winter months. It's hard work, but honest work. The stalks are tough, stubborn things. You soak them in water until the fibers loosen, then pound them flat with wooden mallets. The sound carries across the village, thump, 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 a steady heartbeat of progress. The fibers peel away like hair, shining faintly gold in the sunlight. You twist them into rope, stronger than sinew, resistant to rot. You weave them into cloth, coarse but cool, perfect for the humid summers. You braid them into nets that hold fish, baskets that hold rice, cords that hold up the beams of your roof. And when those nets wear thin, you burn them. The smoke rises, not sacred, not scandalous, just the scent of work and warmth. It's the smell of civilization learning to sustain itself. Hemp becomes the thread that ties the early Chinese world together. Every object seems to hide a trace of it. The rope that hauls stones for city walls, the paper that carries a scholar's brushstroke, the sandals on a peasant's feet, the mats beneath a monk's knees. Even the scrolls that preserve Shen Nung's words are written on hemp, pulp, ground and washed, until it turns soft and pliant. It's as if history itself is being recorded on the same plant that helped create it. Some evenings, when the farmers are done with their work, they sit by the fields and talk about its magic. Not the kind of magic that glows or grants wishes, the subtler kind. The kind that makes the impossible seem ordinary. How can one plant give rope, paper, oil, medicine, and shelter? How can something so small hold up the world? They don't have the answers, they just know it works. And for now, that's enough. A poet in Luoyang writes, "We are all bound by hemp, our sails, our robes, our words." He means it literally, but also spiritually. Hemp in its quiet ubiquity has become the unspoken symbol of continuity, the bridge between nature and need. The empire grows, roads stretch farther, boats glide down the yellow river, their sails woven from hemp cloth, thick enough to survive the monsoon winds. Soldiers march with armor padded in hemp fiber, their tents stitched from its threads. The empire's messengers carry scrolls wrapped in hemp twine, crossing mountain passes that smell faintly of smoke from villages below. Even death, once marked by simple burials, begins to take on new rituals. The shrouds are woven from hemp now, durable, humble, and pure. When families burn offerings to the ancestors, hemp cords are tossed into the flames, so the smoke may carry prayers upward, just as it did in those prehistoric graves so long ago. Every part of the plant has a purpose. The stalk becomes cloth, the leaves feed for animals, the seeds, roasted and eaten or pressed into oil, thick, golden, and faintly sweet. The farmers rub it on cracked hands, light their lamps with it, and even anoint the hinges of their doors. By this point, hemp isn't just useful, it's invisible in its usefulness, so ordinary that no one can imagine life without it. The empire depends on it, the way a body depends on breath. You walk through a village near dusk, children chase each other through the drying racks, their laughter echoing off the water. Women sit near the fires, weaving, their fingers move so fast, the threads seem alive. Men repair fishing nets, their hands black with tar. The whole air smells of oil, smoke, and faint sweetness, the perfume of work and endurance. A traveler passing through the region might notice how calm the rhythm feels. No one speaks of the plant with awe anymore. It's simply there, a companion to every act of living. The same way we forget to marvel at air, or water, or the sound of our own heartbeat. And yet, beneath that ordinariness, hemp still holds its quiet power to heal, to clothe, to bind, to burn. It has become the most democratic of plants. Kings and peasants both wear it. Monks and soldiers both rely on it. It builds boats that conquer seas and ropes that hang bells in temple towers. Sometimes, when storms roll in from the east, the hemp fields bend low in the wind. The stalks creak and sway, and the farmers say the plant is talking to the sky, thanking it for rain, asking it for mercy. They say that if you walk through the fields in those moments, you can hear the sound of the entire empire breathing together. And perhaps, if you listen closely enough, you can also hear something older, a whisper carried on the wind, from a time before dynasties, before writing, before the word China ever existed. The same breath that rose from the fires of the Stone Age, the same smoke that curled from a burial mound thousands of miles away. It's all one story, told through a single plant that refuses to stay still. When the night falls, the farmers gather in their courtyards. They light oil lamps, the flames fed by hemp seed oil, and share bowls of porridge. Someone hums a song that has no beginning or end, just the same few notes repeated, like the turning of a wheel. The children fall asleep on mats of woven fiber, soft beneath their bare feet. And in the distance, the fields sway gently under the moonlight, like an ocean made of silk and memory. Hemp doesn't ask for worship. It doesn't demand temples or offerings. It only asks to be used, to serve quietly, to endure. But sometimes, when a breeze passes through and the leaves shimmer in the dark, you can almost believe it's alive in another way, aware, watchful, patient, as if it knows it's building something greater than rope or cloth, as if it's waiting for humanity to notice what it has been doing all along, holding the world together, one thread at a time. The air grows colder again. The flat fields of China fade behind you, replaced by open steppe, endless, wind-scoured grasslands stretching from the Black Sea to the Altai Mountains. The year is roughly 1000 BCE, though the people here don't count years. They count seasons, migrations, victories. You stand among the Scythians, nomads of the open world. They are horse people, arrow people, smoke people. Their homes are round felt tents that rise and fall like clouds against the horizon. Their gods are the sky, the wind, and the ancestors who never seem quite gone. Everything here moves, herds, fires, tempers. The wind never stops. And yet, within that restless motion, the Scythians have a ritual that brings stillness. When someone dies, they build a small structure on the plains, a chamber of felt stretched tight over poles, sealed to the earth with stones. Inside, the body is laid out with weapons, gold, and sometimes horses. Because in the afterlife, you still need transportation. Then comes the smoke. They heat smooth stones in a pit until they glow orange, lift them carefully with tongs, and drop them into a bronze cauldron. From a leather pouch, they pour hemp seeds onto the stones. Instantly, the air fills with thick, sweet smoke, earthy and pungent, curling like ghosts. Outside, the tribe gathers. They don't mourn quietly. They shout, chant, sing, and pound their chests. Inside the tent, the smoke thickens until it's impossible to see. The Greek historian Herodotus would later describe this scene, writing with a mixture of fascination and alarm. The Scythians take some of this seed, crawl into their tents, and throw it upon red-hot stones. Immediately, it smokes and gives off such a vapor that no Greek bath could surpass it. The Scythians, delighted, howl with joy. It's one of history's first recorded descriptions of a hotbox. Imagine it. 20 warriors, scarred, tattooed, wrapped in furs, huddled inside a tent, lit only by the fire's orange glow. Their breath mingles with the vapor, their songs turn to laughter, their grief becomes a shared trance. To them, this isn't indulgence, it's contact. The smoke isn't a drug, it's a bridge, a path between the living and the dead. They believe that the spirit world lies just beyond the veil of visibility, and the smoke is what thins that veil. When the dead breathe it in, they awaken briefly, enough to recognize the living one last time. When the living breathe it, they drift halfway into the afterlife, enough to say goodbye. No priest leads this ritual. There is no hierarchy in the tent, no titles, only breath, heartbeat, and the hiss of burning seeds. Outside, horses stamp in the snow. Inside, someone starts to hum, a long, low note that vibrates through the chest. Another voice joins, then another, until the tent is filled with sound, not melody, but vibration, like thunder echoing inside a drum. They call it the song of the wind returning. By the time the stones cool, the world feels changed. Faces shine with sweat, eyes are glazed but calm. The mourners emerge from the tent quietly, like divers surfacing from deep water. No one speaks. The body is burned, the ashes are buried beneath a mound, and the golden artifacts, cups, combs, armor, are placed above. Centuries later, archaeologists will uncover these tombs and find, beside the bones, small wooden boxes filled with hemp seeds and stone braziers coated with residue. The evidence will tell them what the Scythians already knew, that smoke could hold memory. For them, cannabis wasn't recreation or rebellion. It was continuity, a rope of breath tying generations together. They didn't talk about enlightenment or medicine. They talked about remembrance. When the warriors weren't burying their dead, they carried that same smoke into life. After battle, when their hands still shook from adrenaline, they gathered in circles, heating stones again. They inhaled deeply, eyes half closed, letting the edges of the world blur until rage faded to laughter. The smoke became a balm for wounds that no salve could reach, the kind inside the mind. Women took part too. Scythian women were fierce, riders, fighters, healers, their hair braided with bits of metal that chimed as they moved. They used cannabis in poultices for childbirth, in infusions for fever, and in quiet moments when they communed with the spirits of ancestors. To them, it was sacred, not forbidden. The earth gave it, therefore, it could not be evil. There were no temples on the steppe, but there were ceremonies in motion, a gallop that became prayer, a campfire that became altar, a circle of smoke that became eternity. At night, when the stars blanketed the sky so thickly they looked like spilled salt, the Scythians would ride out beyond the fires. They believed each star was an ancestor's campfire, burning in the heavens. The smoke from their tents drifted upward, merging with that celestial haze, the living and the dead breathing the same air. You stand among them now, the grass ripples around you, waist high, whispering with the night wind. Somewhere, a drum begins to beat, slow and steady. You follow the sound to another tent, smaller, set apart from the rest. Inside, two elders sit cross-legged, the air thick with fragrant smoke. They speak softly, their words blending with the crackle of fire. You can't understand the language, but the tone is unmistakable. Reverence. The younger of the two reaches into a pouch, scoops out a handful of hemp seeds, and tosses them onto the coals. A column of smoke rises, twisting, shimmering in the torchlight. The elder inhales deeply, then exhales toward the stars visible through the tent's opening. The gesture is simple but profound, an offering, a conversation, a reminder that even the sky can listen. In the centuries to come, other cultures will borrow this ritual. Persian mystics, Indian yogis, even Roman soldiers in distant outposts will inhale smoke for courage, for clarity, for contact with the divine. But here, on the open steppe, it's still pure. It's not yet about philosophy or pleasure. It's about connection to the dead, to the land, to the breath that binds them all. When dawn arrives, the sky turns silver. The last tendrils of smoke drift over the grass, curling and fading like dreams. The tribe mounts their horses, the graves behind them, small as scars on the plain. They ride east, chasing the light, the wind whipping their cloaks. Somewhere in their saddlebags, a pouch of hemp seeds rattles softly, the only cargo that truly matters. No one says it, but they all feel it. The sense that this plant isn't just something they use, it's something that remembers them. And as they disappear into the horizon, the smoke from their camp still hangs in the cold air, a ghost of warmth and memory. It rises, spreads, and begins its long drift toward new lands and new stories, carrying with it the faintest echo of that Scythian song, the one that sounds like breath returning to the world. The wind of the steppe fades into warmth, and the smell of dry grass is replaced by something denser, the fragrance of spice and rain. You are in ancient India now, where the air itself seems alive with rhythm. Here, rivers curve like silver serpents through jungles of green and gold. Drums echo across the valleys, incense coils in temple doorways, and somewhere between prayer and pleasure, the story of cannabis takes a sacred turn. By the time the Scythians were lighting their smoke-filled tents, the people of the Indus Valley had already given the plant a new name, Bang. It wasn't a curiosity here, it was a gift. Divine, deliberate, blessed. In the ancient Atharva Veda, one of the 4 sacred Hindu texts, Bang was listed as one of the 5 holy plants. A source of happiness, a liberator, a bringer of joy. The priests believed it had fallen from the heavens, a green shard of the divine meant to ease the suffering of mortals. And like all sacred things, it came with a god attached. That god was Shiva, ascetic, destroyer, dancer of the cosmos. According to legend, Shiva discovered cannabis after wandering into the mountains, weary from arguments with the world. He lay down under a celestial tree, exhausted, and when he awoke, the leaves of the plant had shaded him, cooled him, restored him. He plucked a few, chewed them thoughtfully, and felt his mind quiet. From that day he was called Lord of Bang. It's hard not to picture him, dreadlocked and calm, sitting on a tiger skin, eyes half-lidded in eternal meditation. In his hand, a cup of milk, honey and crushed cannabis leaves, the sacred drink of release. He sipped slowly, not to escape reality, but to see through it. Because in India, intoxication wasn't shameful, it was transcendence. The plant didn't dull the mind, it peeled it open. It wasn't rebellion, it was communion. In the villages and temples, people prepared bang during festivals dedicated to Shiva. They ground the leaves with stones, mixing them with milk, nuts, sugar, and fragrant spices, cardamom, cloves, black pepper. The air would fill with the earthy scent of crushed leaves and sweet milk, and the first sip always came with a soft laugh, as if the drink itself were amused. It wasn't just the ascetics who drank it. Farmers, laborers, poets, wandering monks, everyone knew its warmth. They said bang opened the heart and silenced the inner noise. It made the spirit lighter, words softer, laughter easier. And when the night grew deep and music rose, it made the stars seem closer. If you were there, in one of those festivals, Mahashivaratri, perhaps, you'd see the entire village awake, long past midnight. Torches line the streets, flickering gold against the stone. Drums beat like the heart of the earth. The faithful sing hymns to Shiva, their voices weaving through smoke and moonlight. They drink bang from clay cups, lift their hands, and dance until the line between body and spirit blurs. And when the chanting slows, when the fires dim and the air cools, they sit together under the trees, calm, smiling, watching the horizon turn pale with the coming dawn. There's no guilt here, no hiding, only reverence, laughter, and the simple peace of shared breath. Cannabis in India didn't hide behind ritual, it was the ritual. It bridged the mundane and the divine. It was medicine for pain, yes, but also for loneliness, for fear, for the endless noise of human thought. It was the pause between two heartbeats. The priests called it the joy giver, the yogis called it the friend, and the poets, of course, called it the leaf of liberation. In one old verse, written long after the Vedas, a wandering sage describes bang like this: "It is the comfort of the gods, the gift of the earth, the drink of the wise, and the forgetfulness of sorrow." Forgetfulness in this world isn't weakness, it's grace. The ability to lay down your burdens, even for a moment, is sacred. In the holy city of Varanasi, you can almost imagine it. Priests bathing in the Ganges at sunrise, their chants echoing off the water. In the markets, vendors sell garlands of marigolds, jars of honey, bundles of hemp leaves wrapped in banana fiber. Everywhere, the scent of smoke and milk. Everywhere, the pulse of devotion. The sadhu, the wandering ascetic, walks through the crowd barefoot, his body painted with ash. He carries a small clay chillum pipe, inside a pinch of dried cannabis. He lights it, inhales, and closes his eyes. The smoke drifts upward, curling toward the sky, like a prayer made visible. He exhales slowly and says, softly, "Budhol Baba Ki Jai, glory to Shiva." You watch him, and it's clear, this isn't indulgence, its discipline, its surrender. The sadhus believe that cannabis quiets the noise of the body so the soul can listen, that its warmth in the chest is a reflection of divine compassion, that every breath through the chillum is a small act of unbinding, a way of releasing attachment, anger, ego, a lesson taught not by scripture but by smoke. Back in the temples, the priests continue to pour bang for the faithful. Children sleep in their parents' laps. Drummers rest their palms on stretched skins, eyes closed. The moon glows like silver fire over the river, and the whole city feels suspended, neither fully awake nor asleep, just gently balanced between both. When dawn finally comes, it feels like waking from a dream that refuses to end. The priests wash the mixing stones in the Ganges. The last traces of green drift downstream, carried toward the sea. Somewhere, a parrot calls from a temple roof. The streets smell of smoke, milk, and rain. And you realize that in this world, the divine isn't distant. It isn't locked away in temples or reserved for the pure. It's in the cup, the leaf, the breath, the laughter. It's in the act of easing a weary heart for one more day. Cannabis here isn't a rebellion against the gods. It's a conversation with them. Not to forget the world, but to see it more clearly, softer, kinder, more bearable. And as the sun rises over the Ganges, turning the water into molten gold, a single wisp of smoke curls upward from a temple courtyard. It drifts higher, glowing pink in the light, and then disappears into the vast blue sky, a small offering to a god who once found peace under a tree and shared it with everyone willing to take a sip. The air shifts again, the scent of spice and milk fades, and in its place comes the cool clarity of pine and stone. You're back in ancient China, though not in the farmlands of Shen anymore. The centuries have turned, the empire has grown old and wise. The rivers carry silk and salt, the mountains guard monasteries wrapped in mist, and high above the noise of markets and court life, a new kind of seeking begins. It is the age of the Taoists, the philosophers of balance and breath, those who look for the invisible threads that hold heaven and earth together. They study quietness the way others study war. They listen to the wind as though it were a teacher. They sit for hours, unmoving, learning to still the pulse until they can feel the heartbeat of the world. For them, hemp, is not a tool or a medicine, but a door. The old medical texts have already listed its virtues: pain relief, rest, balance, but the Taoists aren't looking for healing of the body. They're searching for something subtler, clarity without striving, a state of being so calm that the self dissolves into the rhythm of everything else. Imagine a mountain hermitage somewhere near Chengdu, a monastery built of wood and silence. The air smells of wet moss and lamp oil. A few monks sweep the stone steps, their brushes whispering against the earth. Farther up, in a shaded pavilion, an old man sits beside a bronze brazier. He lifts the lid, drops in a few dried hemp flowers, and waits. The smoke rises in thin ribbons, curling toward the open rafters. It moves slowly, deliberately, as though aware of its own grace. The old man closes his eyes. He doesn't inhale to chase pleasure or visions. He breathes as a craftsman might, precisely, reverently, letting the smoke blend with the rhythm of his breath until there is no line between the two. When he exhales, the smoke becomes prayer. To him, this is not intoxication. It is alignment, the mind matching the pace of the universe. The Taoists call this practice Ting Qi, listening to the breath. In the rising vapor, they say, you can hear the whispers of the Tao itself, the way that can be walked but never named. Some nights, the monks gather to meditate together. They light incense and small bowls of herbs, hemp among them. The scent fills the hall, dry, sweet, grounding. The smoke drifts between them, like a slow river, softening the edges of thought. They chant verses from the Tao Te Ching. To be still is to be clear. To be clear is to see the subtle. The subtle holds the pattern of heaven. Their voices fade into the dark, until only the smoke remains, moving through the air like visible breath. In the valley below, the world moves faster. The court scribes argue over philosophy. The merchants haggle. The generals plot. But up here, time is something to be dissolved, not managed. The Taoists learn that the smoke teaches the same lesson as the river. It rises, curls, and disappears, and in its vanishing, it reveals how little anything truly lasts. They begin to write poems about it, quiet fragments scribbled on silk. The mountain is still, the smoke drifts without asking why. I breathe and the world exhales. For them, hemp's gift is not revelation, but gentleness. It slows the racing thoughts, lets the soul wander without effort. Some monks describe it as feeling the space between sounds. Others call it the soft gate, a threshold between matter and mist. The imperial scholars, of course, look down on this. They call the Taoists dreamers, drifters, those who forget their duties. But the Taoists just smile. They know that the empire will fade, the wars will come and go, and still the mountains will hum the same low note beneath it all. They call hemp marfen, the numinous powder, not for its strength, but for its mystery. In their writings, it becomes a metaphor for the uncarved block, the undisturbed mind, a symbol of what the world was before humans tried to fix it. One Taoist text from the Han Dynasty describes how, when combined with ginseng, hemp can allow the spirit to see the gods. But even then, the aim is not escape, it's recognition. To see the gods, the writer explains, is simply to see yourself without distortion. So you can picture them, those pale-robed philosophers, sitting in their mountain caves, smoke drifting around them like clouds. They breathe in silence, and the world outside, the soldiers, the courtiers, the tax collectors, fades into irrelevance. Sometimes travelers climb the mountain to ask for wisdom. They find the Taoist sitting motionless beside the brazier, eyes half closed. "Master," they say, "what is the secret of peace?" The old man gestures toward the smoke. They stare, waiting for words. He says only, "Watch what it does." And the smoke, of course, does nothing. It rises, it twists, it disappears. For the Taoists, that's the entire lesson. To be alive without clutching. To exist without explanation. To let go without loss. At night, the mountain winds carry the scent of hemp down to the villages below. Farmers, lying on their mats after long days of toil, smell it in their dreams, faint, clean, ancient. They don't know it's coming from the monastery above. They just feel calm. In the centuries to follow, these Taoist practices will quietly influence alchemy, medicine, and even martial arts. The idea of balance, of inner breath, of harmony between body and spirit, all of it traced back to those monks watching smoke curl through mountain air. No one writes songs about them, no empires claim them, but their calm endures, drifting quietly through history like a forgotten fragrance. If you listen closely, you can still hear it now, the echo of that slow breath in a quiet room, the sound of smoke being born and dying at the same time. And perhaps that's the secret they were guarding all along, that peace is not found in conquering or collecting, but in dissolving, into air, into silence, into the same nothingness that gives rise to everything else. As dawn creeps up the mountain, the brazier's last ember fades. The monk opens his eyes, smiles faintly, and watches the final wisp of smoke curl upward, vanishing into pale gold light. No ceremony, no doctrine, no revelation, only this, the sky, the breath, and the quiet understanding that they were never separate. The mist of the Taoist mountains thins and turns to desert wind. The world becomes gold and red, dry hills, cracked stone, and the far shimmer of heat. You are now standing in ancient Persia, sometime between the Bronze and Iron Ages, where the horizon burns by day and glows with stars by night. This is a land of fire worshippers and poets, where thought itself seems forged in flame. It's a civilization of enormous stillness, where silence means reverence, and the wind carries prayers across sand and centuries. Here, smoke is not escape or accident. It is philosophy made visible. The Persians believe that fire is sacred, not because it burns, but because it transforms. Fire is truth made light. Fire is the visible breath of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of wisdom. Every temple, called an Atashka, or house of fire, keeps a flame that has burned since time beyond memory. Priests in white robes tend it day and night, feeding it with sandalwood and sweet resin, whispering hymns in the oldest language still spoken. And among those resins, one stands apart, a humble resinous herb that the ancients call konobo, the same word that would one day evolve into cannabis. To them it isn't a vice or indulgence. It's a tool for focus, an offering that carries human thought upward, through the sacred smoke to the gods themselves. You can imagine the temple at dusk, a low stone building half buried in the desert, the air outside humming with heat. Inside, coolness, and silence so deep it feels alive. At the center stands the flame, steady and golden, fed by herbs that crackle faintly when they meet the coals. The priests move slowly around it, hands raised in prayer. They breathe deeply, inhaling the fragrant mix of burning oil and resin. Their chants rise and fall like waves, ancient syllables carried on fragrant smoke. One young acolyte, his robe still bright, his voice still unsure, closes his eyes and breathes it in. For a moment the walls seem to shimmer, the flame flickers larger, and the air feels as though it's pulsing. But what he feels isn't chaos, it's clarity. His thoughts slow, his heartbeat steadies. In the glow of the sacred fire, he senses something vast, not a presence, but a connection, as if his own breath and the fire's breath are the same. This was the goal of Zoroastrian philosophy, to live in harmony with Asher, the order and truth of the universe. And in these temples, cannabis smoke became not escape from the world, but entry into its pattern. Outside, the people of Persia use the plant in simpler ways. They mix the seeds with oil for lamps, press them into poultices for pain, or grind them into paste for ceremonies. But in the temples, it takes on a deeper meaning. It becomes a symbol of transformation, of surrender, of unity between the body that burns and the spirit that rises. Somewhere near the city of Ekbatana, a philosopher writes, "Smoke is the path of the thought. It leaves the body, rises, and joins the light. Thus the wise man does not fear death, for the mind has always been fire." It's hard not to feel the poetry of that idea, that thinking itself is a kind of combustion, and that by breathing, you participate in the cosmos. When night falls, the desert turns cold. The priests leave the temple one by one, their robes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Only the keeper of the fire remains. He kneels before the flame, places another handful of konobu onto the coals, and watches the smoke rise through the temple's open roof. The stars above seem endless. He exhales and whispers the evening prayer. The flame within me greets the flame without. He doesn't need to explain it. He knows that the same energy that burns in the hearth burns in the stars, and the smoke that rises from the altar is the same breath that stirs the desert wind. As the Persian Empire grows, this reverence for fire and smoke spreads outward into Babylonia, Assyria, and the lands beyond the Tigris. Traders carry bundles of herbs and stories along caravan routes, passing them from one culture to the next. What was once a sacred tool becomes, slowly, a companion to thought itself. Poets begin to use it, not in temples, but in gardens, beneath moonlight. They sit by fountains and read verses of longing and reflection, their words carried by the same sweet haze that once rose to the gods. They say the smoke opens the door of imagination, allowing ideas to wander freely, to find each other. And in those gardens, the philosophy of fire becomes the philosophy of poetry. One poet of the Median court writes, "When I burn the leaf, I see the heart of things. The smoke hides nothing, it only makes the hidden visible." The line will be copied, centuries later, by Sufi mystics who never knew his name. The Persians don't see contradiction in this, that a substance can be both sacred and social, holy and human. For them, all creation is a spectrum between material and spirit. The smoke is simply the middle, the place where the two shake hands. And so it continues, from temple to palace, from priest to poet, from the sacred fire to the household lamp. The ritual loses its formality, but not its essence. When a family gathers at night, they light a small brazier in the courtyard, just as their ancestors did. They whisper prayers to Ahura Mazda. The children watch the smoke curl upward and vanish into the star-filled sky. The adults talk softly about the day's labor, their faces warm in the glow. It's a quiet communion, no priest, no rule, no fear, just breath and flame. And if you listen carefully, you can almost hear what the old philosophers must have heard in the sound of crackling resin, the faint reminder that we are temporary, but connection is eternal. Long after the temples crumble and the priests are gone, that idea will survive. The notion that fire is truth, that smoke is thought, that every breath we take is both an offering and a return. You can still feel it now, in the warmth of a candle, in the slow drift of incense, in the sigh that escapes after a long day. Each a quiet echo of those desert fires, where philosophy first took form, and the smoke of a humble plant became the visible language of the soul. The red heat of Persia fades into the cool shimmer of the Nile. You stand at the threshold of ancient Egypt, where the air itself feels eternal, warm by day, perfumed by lotus, and myrrh by night, every breeze carrying the faint sound of water and distant hymns. Here, life and death live side by side. Every act, weaving linen, shaping bread, building a wall, is a rehearsal for eternity. And in this world, where gods walk beside their statues, and souls are weighed like grain, even the smallest plant can be divine. Cannabis grows quietly here, tucked among the reeds near the delta, known by its ancient name, Shem. It isn't a centerpiece of religion like the lotus, nor a sacred food like barley. It's something subtler, an ingredient of mercy, a healer's ally, a comfort for the living, and a companion for the dead. The Egyptians were practical mystics. They didn't divide the body from the soul. They treated both with the same precision. Their medicine was a blend of magic and science, incantation and anatomy. And in their lists of herbs, carved carefully into temple walls and written on rolls of papyrus, Shem appears again and again. In one ancient recipe, it's mixed with honey and applied to the skin for inflammation. In another, it's brewed into oil for easing cramps and childbirth pains. And in yet another, found in the Ebers papyrus, dated around 1550 BCE, it's used as an ingredient in ointments for soothing sorrow of the heart. Sorrow in Egyptian medicine was not simply sadness, it was imbalance, the spirit's quiet ache. You can almost see it, a healer in linen robes, standing in a courtyard open to the sun. She grinds the dried flowers with a bronze pestle, murmuring words that sound half prayer, half recipe. The pestle strikes the bowl in steady rhythm, echoing the beat of the Nile. She mixes the powder with honey, dates, and resin, and the scent that rises is rich and earthy, the smell of warmth turned tangible. She kneels beside a patient, a woman in labor, sweating, trembling. The healer rubs the ointment onto her temples, whispers to the goddess Hathor for strength, and waits. Slowly, the woman's breathing steadies, her pain eases. In that moment, the plant is no longer an herb, it is a kindness. In temples dedicated to Isis, the Great Mother, priestesses burn fragrant mixtures that sometimes include cannabis among the resin and frankincense. They believe the smoke carries the prayers upward, where the goddess listens, not to grant wishes, but to remember them. Egyptian religion is full of remembering. When someone dies, they are not gone, they are transformed. Their name is a seed that must be spoken to stay alive. Their body is wrapped in layers of linen, anointed with oils, many of which contain trace amounts of cannabis. The scent is not of decay, but of preservation, sweet, musky, eternal. You can picture a mummification chamber deep inside a stone tomb. Cool air, oil lamps flickering, priests working in silence, their hands steady and sure. One pours a dark green mixture into a bowl and stirs it with a bronze rod. He dips linen strips into the liquid, wringing them out, the smell sharp but soothing, like grass after rain. They wrap the body with reverence, layer upon layer, whispering the book of the dead as they go. May your soul rise upon the smoke. May your heart be light upon the scale. May your breath return to the wind. In this ritual, cannabis becomes the invisible thread between worlds, not to intoxicate, but to accompany. The Egyptians believe the soul has many parts. Kesa, the life force. Ba, the personality. Akh, the immortal self. The plant's smoke was thought to help the Ba, the wandering spirit, find its way home. Even the great pharaohs knew this. In the tomb of Ramses II, traces of cannabis pollen were found among the wrappings, carried through centuries of sand. To the Egyptians, such inclusion wasn't superstition, it was insurance. If this plant had eased pain in life, surely it could ease the passage to the next one. Outside the tombs, the living used it too. In the heat of the day, farmers rubbed their shoulders with hemp oil. Mothers brewed weak teas to calm restless children. Scribes mixed it into ink for rituals that required clear sight and steady hand. It was never scandalous, never outlawed. It simply was, another instrument in the orchestra of survival. At night, the Nile glows with reflected starlight. Priests float small clay lamps on its surface, each carrying a prayer for the dead. The flame flickers in the breeze, mirrored by its twin in the water, one above, one below. That balance is the essence of Egyptian faith. Nothing ends, nothing begins, everything is reflection. Somewhere on the riverbank, a young embalmer pauses to rest. He watches the lights drift downstream, carries the faint scent of cannabis resin in his hair, and thinks about the souls he has wrapped and sent beyond. He doesn't fear death. He knows it too well, its smell, its silence, its gentleness, when properly tended. He closes his eyes and murmurs a verse taught to every apprentice of Anubis. Life is the breath, death is the exhale. Both belong to the same wind. He exhales. The lamplight trembles. Somewhere in the dark, a night bird cries over the water. Cannabis, here, has fulfilled a destiny older than any empire. It has become a comforter. In Persia it was philosophy, in India devotion, in China balance. But in Egypt it is mercy. It doesn't lift the spirit out of the body. It lets the body rest so the spirit can rise untroubled. You can almost smell it, that soft, warm scent of oil and smoke, mingling with lotus and myrrh. You can almost hear the low hum of priests chanting beside the eternal flame. and you can almost feel the desert wind carrying the last traces of incense toward the horizon, where the sun will rise again, exactly as it has for thousands of years. For Egypt, death was never an ending, it was continuity, and the plant that grew quietly along the Nile became one of its gentlest symbols, a small green promise that pain, like the body, could be transformed into peace. And when the morning sun touches the top of the pyramids, the world glows gold, and the smoke from the temples, thin and shimmering, climbs skyward one last time, carrying with it a message older than language itself. The body is dust, the spirit is air, and mercy is the breath between them. The golden light of Egypt softens into the pale, brilliant glow of the Aegean Sea. You're in ancient Greece now, a world that smells of salt, olive oil, and freshly cracked stone. Here, reason and beauty are worshipped equally. Even the sunlight feels philosophical, as if it's asking a question you're meant to answer slowly. This is a civilization that loves conversation. They talk about everything: ethics, geometry, desire, and death, in public courtyards, over wine beside the fire, beneath columns that seem to hold up not only roofs, but ideas. And in those conversations, smoke often curls quietly in the air. The Greeks were great borrowers of gods, of crops, of thoughts. They took geometry from Egypt, alphabets from Phoenicia, and the seeds of hemp, cannabis, from the Scythians to the north, and the Persians to the east. By the 5th century BCE, hemp had woven itself into Greek life as naturally as olive and barley. It clothed the fishermen, strengthened the sails of triremes, and eased the pains of soldiers returning from war. But unlike the solemn Persians or the mystical Indians, the Greeks approached the plant as they did everything, with curiosity, humor, and a sense of proportion. Nothing was sacred unless it was balanced, and everything, even pleasure, needed philosophy. In the marketplace of Athens, the vendors call out over the clatter of sandals: fish, figs, olives, bread, and somewhere, a small stand selling bundles of dried hemp fiber. The merchant grins when you pass. "Good rope, good medicine," he says, holding it up like an offering. The scent is faintly sharp, grassy, clean. Hemp ropes hang from ships in the harbor, stiff with salt. In the workshops, women spin the fibers into thread, their fingers stained green. Doctors, following the teachings of Hippocrates, mix hemp seeds with wine and vinegar to treat inflammation and ear pain. Sailors chew the seeds like nuts during long voyages, believing they strengthen the stomach and keep the mind steady against the sea. But it isn't only the laborers who know the plant. In the symposia, the dinner parties of philosophers and poets, it finds another life. Picture a marble courtyard lit by oil lamps. The air smells of roasted lamb, figs, and honeyed wine. A flute plays somewhere, slow and haunting. Men recline on low couches, talking about love, justice, and the nature of the soul. Servants move between them, refilling cups, bringing platters, feeding the steady rhythm of debate. At one end of the room, a physician-philosopher, perhaps Democritus, perhaps someone like him, unwraps a small pouch of herbs. He sprinkles a few leaves into the brazier, and a faintly sweet smoke rises. It's not a performance, it's punctuation, a way of slowing the talk, deepening it. Someone laughs, someone sighs. The smoke thickens, and for a moment the conversation drifts from argument to wonder. A poet stares at the shadows on the wall and begins to recite lines about gods walking among mortals in disguise. The others listen, not solemnly, but with soft amusement, that half smile that Greeks wear when they sense truth dressed in play. This is what makes their world unique. Nothing is too sacred to be laughed at, and nothing too ridiculous to be contemplated. Even the gods themselves drink and argue. So it makes perfect sense that a plant capable of easing pain and softening the edges of thought would find a welcome place here, not as religion, not as rebellion, but as conversation. The philosopher Herodotus, always the collector of stories, wrote about the Scythians and their howling smoke. He didn't condemn it, he found it fascinating. To him, it was one more example of how humans everywhere reach for the same sensations, the same glimpses of mystery, in different ways. He might have tried it himself, for curiosity's sake, noting its effects with the detachment of a scientist. Pleasant warmth, he might have written, inspiration tempered by slowness of tongue. Meanwhile, in the gymnasiums, where athletes trained for the games, hemp oil was rubbed into sore muscles. It soothed, it restored, and when mixed with honey, it healed wounds faster than any other balm. No one called it mystical, they just called it useful. That practicality extended to medicine. The surgeon Dioscorides, centuries later, would catalogue cannabis in his De Materia Medica, describing its power to quiet pain, reduce swelling, and dull excessive joy. In a world that feared imbalance more than evil, that last point mattered. Too much laughter, like too much sorrow, was a symptom. Balance, sophrosyne, was the ideal of Greek life, and cannabis, in small measure, fit perfectly within it. A touch for pain, a breath for thought, a thread for rope, a seed for the field, always moderate, always measured. In the evenings when the sun sank into the sea and the marble temples turned gold, the philosophers walked through the colonnades of the agora, still arguing softly. Plato might be speaking of the soul as harmony. Aristotle might be dissecting the nature of pleasure, and somewhere behind them, a group of sailors shared a small brazier's smoke, laughing over the day's storms. Different worlds, same air. No one wrote hymns to cannabis in Greece, but if they had, they might have sounded like this. O leaf of calm thought, you steady the hand and ease the heart. You remind us that to live well is to neither cling nor flee. The Greeks didn't worship the plant, they understood it. They saw in it the same lesson they found in geometry and art, that harmony exists everywhere, in music, in mathematics, in the quiet pulse of the body. Even pleasure, properly balanced, could be an instrument of truth. At night, the symposium ends. The lamps gutter low. The last cup of wine is poured as the smoke fades to a faint blue ribbon twisting toward the open sky. Someone quotes Socrates, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Another adds, smiling, "And the over-examined life needs a drink." Laughter ripples softly through the courtyard. The stars above are perfectly still. The city hums below, alive and dreaming. Cannabis, in this world, was never exile. It was return. A reminder that the mind and body, when tuned together, can find the same rhythm the gods dance to. No ecstasy, no shame, only proportion. And as dawn breaks over the Acropolis, the smoke that once curled through marble halls drifts out over the water, where ships with hemp sails wait for wind. Their ropes creak, their crews yawn and stretch. The world wakes balanced, bright, curious, and quietly at ease. The blue of the Aegean hardens into steel. The air thickens with the smell of iron, leather, and salt. Scythian Greece fades into its successor, Rome, the empire of order. Here the world has traded poetry for discipline, marble for marble still, but now carved by soldiers' hands. Everything has purpose. Every road leads to control. Every plant has a use. And so, of course, the Romans found a place for hemp. They called it Cannabis sativa, borrowing the Greek name but stripping it of myth. No god owned it now. It was a material, a tool, a fiber as vital as iron. The empire's power was measured not in ideas, but in movement. Legions marching, ships sailing, messages carried along roads that cut through continents. Hemp held that machinery together. In the shipyards of Ostia, you can smell it before you see it, that faint, earthy musk of hemp soaked in seawater. Workers stand knee-deep in brine, twisting rope as thick as their wrists. Each strand is 1,000 fibers spun and beaten and soaked until it shines like bronze. Those ropes hold the sails of Roman galleys, the vessels that keep the empire breathing, bringing grain from Egypt, silver from Hispania, silk from the east. Without hemp, Rome would be smaller. The sails would tear, the nets would rot, the bridges would fray. Even the siege engines, those great wooden monsters that hurled stones at city walls, were bound together by hemp ropes. In one record from the 1st century, the engineer Vitruvius wrote that the best ropes were made from cannabina, grown in the damp valleys of Campania. He described its fibers as both flexible and incorruptible, the veins of the empire. That's what Rome did best. It took what others treated as sacred and made it infrastructure. The same plant that carried prayers in Persia and smoke in India now carried armies across seas. Yet even in this world of discipline and conquest, there was softness, small corners where mercy still bloomed. In the physician's rooms, among the jars of honey, vinegar, and poppy resin, you'll find hemp oil. Doctors, following the writings of Pliny the Elder and Dioscorides, used it to treat earaches, burns, and joint pain. Pliny described it with typical Roman directness. The juice of cannabis, when boiled down, eases pain in the joints and cures gout, though it brings heaviness to the head. It was medicine, not miracle, a balm for the body's wear, the price of labor and age. You can picture it, an old legionnaire returned from campaign, sitting by the hearth. His knees ache when the rain comes. His wife warms a small pot of oil infused with crushed hemp seeds and wild herbs. She rubs it into his joints, her hands steady from years of tending to wounds that men insist are nothing. He exhales, the pain loosening just enough for him to sleep. There is no mysticism here, no incense, no ritual, just practicality and a tenderness hidden in the rhythm of usefulness. Even Rome's women found ways to make the plant theirs. They spun its fibers into clothing finer than wool, cool, durable, perfect for the Mediterranean heat. In the gardens of Pompeii, hemp grew quietly beside flax and poppies. Its leaves, pressed and steeped, went into tonics for childbirth and menstrual pain. The physician Soranus of Ephesus, who wrote the earliest known treatise on gynecology, mentioned hemp oil among his remedies for the distress of womanly humors. It was an empire obsessed with control, yet the plant thrived in its margins, in sailors' knots, in healers' jars, in the dust of caravans. In the taverns along the Tiber, merchants and soldiers shared stories from the far edges of the world. They spoke of the Scythian smoke tents, the Indian bang, the Persian incense. Someone would laugh and call it superstition, another curiosity, and somewhere a philosopher, perhaps a Stoic, would nod quietly and say, even superstition reveals what man longs for, to feel less pain, to see more clearly. It's easy to forget, among the marble and legions, that Rome was also a civilization of thinkers. The Stoics, those calm sculptors of emotion, might have appreciated the plant's lesson, that peace often comes from letting go. They sought apatheia, freedom from disturbance, through reason. Others found it through a handful of seeds crushed in oil. Different paths, same goal. Hemp even entered Rome's ceremonies, though not with divine fanfare. In funerals, priests burned it among other herbs to sweeten the air, masking the scent of bodies before cremation. The smoke drifted upward, carrying not prayers but memory, one more echo of that old human instinct, to send the dead away on breath and flame. And when the ashes cooled, the hemp ropes would pull the funeral barge down the Tiber toward the sea. Everything in Rome returns to movement: ships, roads, trade, conquest. The hemp fields near Ravenna stretch for miles, a living map of empire. Slaves harvest the stalks in summer, singing work songs that blend Latin with older tongues. The sun blazes on their backs. The smell of resin and sweat fills the air. By dusk, the bundles are stacked in wagons bound for the ports. The same fibers that once held together a fisherman's net now wait to bind the sails of a ship that will carry soldiers to Gaul or scrolls to Alexandria. Every rope, every strand, another invisible line in the web of empire. And yet, for all its grandeur, Rome remains mortal. One night, in a small villa outside Pompeii, a scholar sits by an oil lamp, copying notes from Dioscorides' herbal manual. He writes, "The leaf of cannabis, when prepared with wine, may ease the grief of the heart." He pauses, pen hovering above parchment. Outside, thunder rolls over Vesuvius. He smiles faintly, thinking of the irony that in this world of conquest and discipline, the simplest comfort is still a leaf and a breath. The empire would fall, of course. All empires do. But the plant would survive it, woven into sails, pressed into oils, wrapped around the bones of civilization like a quiet, enduring thread. And as the last Roman ships leave the harbor, their hemp ropes groaning under tension, a breeze carries a trace of the same scent that once drifted from Scythian tents, Indian temples, and Egyptian tombs. A single smell, stretching across time, of fiber, of smoke, of humanity, endlessly trying to bind the fragile to the eternal. The empire of marble and order dissolves into dust. The roads that Rome built, those straight lines across continents, remain, but they are no longer roads of conquest. They have become pathways of exchange, thin veins connecting distant worlds. And along those veins moves everything that defines civilization: silk, gold, paper, spices, and a small, humble plant whose smoke has followed humanity since the first fire. This is the age of the Silk Road, a thread of trade and memory stretching from China to the Mediterranean, more than 4,000 miles long. No map captures it completely. It's not a single path, but a living organism, a river of travelers, merchants, monks, horses, and wind. And somewhere in their saddlebags, bound in bundles of straw or tucked inside clay jars, ride the seeds and fibers of cannabis. From the Chinese plains, where Taoist monks still burn it in meditation, to the Persian temples where smoke carries prayers to the gods, to the markets of Samarkand, where traders haggle over cloth and camels, the plant travels, quietly, steadily, like an old friend who refuses to stay home. You can smell it long before you see it. In Kashgar's market, the air is a storm of aromas: cumin, sandalwood, horse sweat, and hemp fiber drying in the sun. Merchants call out in half a dozen languages. Some are Buddhists in saffron robes, others Muslim traders from the West, their faces lined from years of desert wind. Everyone bargains, everyone listens, and everyone in their own way understands the value of this plant. The weavers prize its fiber, stronger than flax, softer than leather. The healers grind its seeds into paste for fevers and wounds. The wanderers burn its leaves when the nights grow cold, letting the smoke keep the loneliness away. It becomes a universal language, practical, portable, eternal. You can't eat gold, can't wear silk forever, but hemp endures. It binds, warms, heals. And in the high passes of the Pamir Mountains, where the air thins to ice and silence, it offers a small miracle of warmth, a brief reminder of the earth in a world made of stone. Caravans stretch for miles, moving like insects across the desert. Each camel carries the weight of 10 civilizations: porcelain from Shen, saffron from Persia, glass from Rome, and bales of hemp fiber for rope and cloth. At night, when the stars emerge sharp as blades, the traders gather around fires. They eat dried fruit, drink wine or tea, and burn handfuls of herbs in small clay bowls. The smoke curls upward, mingling with the breath of men who've seen more of the world than most kings. No one calls it ritual, but in those moments, laughter fading into quiet, firelight flickering on bronze cups, it feels sacred. The smoke rises, the wind takes it, and the desert itself seems to exhale. There are stories told in those fires. One merchant swears he met monks in India who drink a green potion that opens the mind. Another claims he saw nomads in the north who use hemp smoke to speak to their ancestors. A third, an old Greek physician traveling west, listens and smiles. He's seen the plant in ointments and salves, in temples and tombs. He knows its journey better than any of them. Everywhere I go, he says, I find it waiting like an old friend who knows 1,000 names. By the 1st century CE, cannabis has crossed the known world. In the East it's medicine and meditation. In the West it's rope and remedy. And in between, along these dusty endless routes, it's both. The Silk Road doesn't just carry goods, it carries ideas. As the plant travels, so do philosophies. Taoism meets Buddhism, Greek rationalism meets Persian mysticism. The smoke that once rose from Shen Nung's fields and Shiva's temples now drifts through Buddhist monasteries in the Himalayas, where monks seek to empty the self completely, to reach Shunyata, the void. In a monastery perched above the clouds, a monk kneels before a small bowl of burning herbs. The smoke is thin, delicate. He breathes it in and exhales slowly, tracing the circle of impermanence with his mind. He doesn't see visions or gods, only stillness. He smiles. He knows this scent has traveled farther than most armies ever will. Down in the valleys, merchants carry hemp fiber to the artisans who weave it into scrolls, the earliest forms of paper. The words of Laozi, Buddha, and later the Quran will all rest upon this same substance. A plant that once carried smoke now carries scripture. By the time the caravans reach Persia, the plant has taken on a new form again, hashish, the pressed resin. It's smaller, easier to trade, less fragile than leaf or stalk. Traders hand it over in small cakes, dark as amber, fragrant as the desert after rain. In the markets of Herat and Bactria, poets begin to use it, not to dull thought, but to chase inspiration. They say it brings dreams into sharper focus, turns memory to color. The Sufis will one day call it the green key, but that's still to come. For now it's just another item on the merchant's list, traded by weight, valued by scent. As the caravans move westward, across Mesopotamia, the plant becomes part of the daily rhythm of life. Farmers plant it beside barley and onions. Rope makers soak it in the rivers near Babylon. Sailors along the Persian Gulf spin it into cords and nets, their hands rough with resin, and slowly it slips into every corner of civilization. Invisible, indispensable. It's easy to forget, looking at those great maps of empire, that this movement wasn't led by kings or armies. It was carried on the backs of camels, by people whose names history never kept. A trader's apprentice, a widow selling cloth, a monk with a pouch of seeds, a child carrying rope to a shipyard. Each of them moved a little piece of the world forward. Each of them added one more breath to the great cloud of smoke that's followed us since the first fire. When the Silk Road finally meets the Mediterranean, the air changes again, sharper, salty, full of promise. The merchants stand at the edge of the sea and watch ships being loaded with silk and hemp, ready to sail toward Africa and Europe. They have no idea they've just woven the world together. The plant will continue to travel through crusades, conquests, and centuries, changing names, meanings, and destinies. But here, at the crossroads of desert and sea, its legacy takes shape, a single thread tying together medicine, meditation, poetry, and trade. The Silk Road fades into twilight. The last caravan bell jingles in the distance, and as the fires go out, a thin ribbon of smoke drifts upward, silent, timeless, carrying with it the breath of 1,000 travelers who never met, but all for one quiet moment breathed the same air. The caravans fade into memory. The Silk Road becomes less a path and more a bloodstream, pulsing with faith and fragrance. It is now the 13th century, and the air of the Middle East trembles with poetry and prayer. Empires rise and fall as easily as smoke from a lamp, and into this swirl of conquest and contemplation drifts something small and unassuming, a pressed cake of dark green resin known simply as hashish. It is the child of the Silk Road, born from resin scraped, pressed, and traded across 1,000 miles. But here, in the hands of mystics, it becomes something else entirely, a sacrament of joy. This is the age of the Sufis, the wandering mystics of Islam, poets, ascetics, and lovers of God. They travel from Persia to Baghdad, from Cairo to Konya, seeking the same thing that the Taoists once sought in their mountains, and the yogis in their caves, union with the eternal. But the Sufis don't seek stillness, they seek ecstasy. For them, truth isn't found in silence, but in the whirling chaos of love, the kind that burns the ego to ash and leaves only laughter behind. And in their gatherings, hashish becomes one of the doorways. You can imagine it, a narrow room lit by oil lamps, walls painted with calligraphy that curls like wind, drums pulse low, heartbeat steady. The air smells of rosewater, tobacco, and sweet smoke. A circle of men sit cross-legged, faces illuminated by the flickering light. At the center lies a small brass tray, and on it, a lump of dark hashish. One of them, an older man with eyes bright as coals, warms it gently over the flame until it softens. He crumbles it into the bowl of a long-stemmed pipe and passes it around. No one rushes, no one speaks. When each inhales, it's not indulgence, it's remembrance. They say the smoke is a reminder of God's breath, the same breath that shaped Adam from clay. When it returns to the older man, he sets the pipe down and begins to chant. There is nothing but the one. Every leaf is his whisper, every breath his song. The others join in, their voices weaving like threads. Soon the chant becomes rhythm, rhythm becomes melody, and melody becomes movement. They sway, clap, spin, the famous dick, the remembrance. They dance until the room itself seems to breathe with them, until laughter and tears arrive together. Outside, the world is sharp with law and war. Inside, there is only joy. To the orthodox scholars, this joy is dangerous. They write edicts against hashish, calling it distraction, indulgence, sin. But the Sufis smile. They know the difference between forgetting the world and remembering something larger than it. In the words of Rumi, the poet who turned love into scripture, there are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground, and for some the smoke is one of them. The Sufis are not careless with it. They use it as they use wine in their poems, not literally, but symbolically, to speak of the intoxication of the divine. Hashish becomes a metaphor for the blurring of self, the loosening of the mind's grip. It is the sweetness that comes after surrender. In the gardens of Baghdad, poets gather under cypress trees, reciting verses while the air hums with the scent of mint and resin. One of them, a student of al-Hallaj, says softly, "When the smoke enters, I vanish. When I vanish, he appears." The others nod, not as believers or heretics, but as fellow travelers who know what it means to dissolve. In Cairo, on the banks of the Nile, musicians strum lutes in the night air. Their songs are filled with metaphors, so layered that the same line can mean love, death, or enlightenment, depending on the listener's heart. The pipes pass from hand to hand, the laughter rises and falls, and for a few hours, life itself seems to shimmer, neither sacred nor profane, just profoundly alive. Hashish becomes part of the city's rhythm. In the alleys of Damascus, the scent drifts from coffee houses where storytellers spin epics of kings and jinn. In Aleppo, merchants share it at dusk, their ledgers forgotten, their talk turning to philosophy. It spreads through caravans, palaces, prisons, everywhere human longing goes. By the 14th century, it has become both revered and reviled. The scholars argue, if wine is forbidden because it clouds the mind, what of a plant that opens it? Some call it the herb of insight, others, the friend of idleness, but neither side can banish it. It's too old, too familiar, too intertwined with the pulse of life. The Sufis keep it alive through poetry. They write of gardens where the smoke hangs like silk between trees, of hearts light enough to float, of laughter that sounds like prayer. In one anonymous verse from Persia, he who drinks from the green cup forgets nothing. He remembers that all is one taste, sweet, bitter, divine. The beauty of the Sufi tradition is that it never cared much for certainty. To them, doubt and faith were both steps on the same spiral staircase. The only unforgivable sin was arrogance, the belief that one had arrived, so they use hashish not as a shortcut to enlightenment, but as a reminder of how easily enlightenment slips through the fingers. To inhale and exhale, to rise and fall, the same rhythm that governs prayer and death. It is the smoke of impermanence, visible and kind. There are nights when the Sufis gather under open skies, their drums echoing across the dunes. They burn herbs in bronze bowls, the flames licking at the darkness. Their laughter carries on the wind. Travelers passing nearby sometimes hear it and mistake it for madness. But those who stop and listen hear something else, the sound of devotion disguised as joy. As dawn approaches, the chanting slows. The lamps gutter out. The last tendrils of smoke drift upward, pale and fragile in the new light. The old man who led the chant wipes his eyes, smiling. He whispers a line from the Koran, "We are nearer to him than the vein in your neck." And then he laughs, the gentle, weary laughter of one who has searched everywhere and finally found home. In the centuries to come, the smoke of hashish will spread farther still, into courts, armies, coffee houses, and poetry that outlives its authors. But its heart will always remain here, in a circle of Sufis singing to the dawn, reminding the world that joy too can be a kind of prayer. The sun rises, the wind shifts, and the desert returns to silence. Only the faint scent of resin lingers, a whisper that says softly, "Everything is the beloved." The laughter of the Sufis fades into something sharper, the clink of steel, the whisper of stone, the hush of fear. The world has changed again. The Mongols thunder across Asia, crusaders march from the west. And between them, hidden high in the mountains of Persia and Syria, another legend begins to take shape, one whispered in the smoky corners of taverns, traded between pilgrims, written in trembling ink by men who have never seen what they describe. The legend of the assassins. It begins in the late 11th century with a man named Hassani Saba. To his followers, he is the old man of the mountain, scholar, revolutionary, mystic, strategist. To his enemies, he is a phantom, a spider at the center of an invisible web. He founds a secret order in the fortress of Alamut, perched like an eagle's nest in the Elburz Mountains. From there, his disciples, known as the Hashishin, move silently through history, leaving behind a wake of fear and fascination. They are said to kill with precision and vanish without trace. They strike kings, generals, and imams, never for coin, always for message. Their power lies not in numbers, but in myth, and at the heart of that myth lies a single word, Hashish. It appears first in the writings of their enemies, the chroniclers of the Crusades, who hear rumors of these mountain assassins and search for an explanation. How could men be so fearless, so devoted, so willing to die at a signal? The answer, they decide, must be intoxication. They say the old man drugged his followers with hashish, led them into a garden filled with fountains, music, and beautiful women, a vision of paradise. When they awoke, he promised them they would return there if they obeyed his command and died for him. It's a perfect story, exotic, terrifying, and easy to believe. But like all perfect stories, it's mostly false. The word Hashishin probably didn't mean hashish user at all. It may have meant outcasts, followers of Hassan, or simply been a slur thrown by their enemies. Yet the tale was too intoxicating to resist. Europe repeated it until the word itself transformed from Hashishin to assassin. A myth so potent it reshaped language. Still, it's worth pausing here, at Alamut, to imagine what was real. The fortress stands on a narrow peak above the clouds, a place of study and silence. Its walls are carved from the mountain itself. Inside, there is a library, one of the finest of its age, filled with texts on astronomy, geometry, medicine, and philosophy. The followers of Hassan study not only the Quran, but also Greek science and Persian poetry. They are Ismaili Shet, devoted to knowledge as much as faith. Hassan himself is no mystic hedonist. He's austere, a man of discipline who eats little, sleeps less, and spends his life writing treatises on logic. He forbids drunkenness. He encourages study, meditation, and loyalty born of conviction, not intoxication. If there is any smoke at Alamut, it's from the oil lamps in the library, not from a pipe. But legends are stubborn things. They grow in the spaces between fear and fascination. And to the crusaders who faced death in foreign lands, the idea of drugged assassins serves both as explanation and excuse. The perfect fantasy of evil. When Marco Polo arrives, 2 centuries later, he repeats the story with embellishment. He claims to have heard it from locals, though he never visits the fortress itself. In his version, the garden becomes more elaborate. Rivers of wine, silk tents, and virgins, with faces like the moon. A paradise conjured by smoke and deception. Europe eats it up. The truth, that these men were political idealists defending a persecuted sect, that they valued intellect over violence, disappears under layers of fear. From Hashishin, meaning perhaps nothing more than the devoted, comes the word assassin, meaning murderer. 1,000 years of misunderstanding, all born from a mistranslated whisper. Yet, even myths reveal something about those who tell them. To the medieval West, hashish itself became shorthand for corruption, exotic danger, and unholy ecstasy, the dark opposite of wine which their own faith had sanctified. The East was sensual, chaotic, unknowable. The smoke became a metaphor for everything they feared and desired. But if you could have stood then on the terraces of Alamut, looking down over the mist, you would have seen something quieter. Students debating astronomy under torchlight, scribes copying texts by hand, guards sharpening blades in silence, and perhaps 1 or 2 elders sitting by the fire, speaking softly about the nature of devotion. They might have quoted Rumi, though he lived later. The wound is the place where the light enters you, and perhaps that was the real secret of the so-called assassins, not intoxication, but focus. An unwavering belief that knowledge and loyalty could carve meaning into a violent world. Still, the myth endured because it was irresistible. Even centuries later, when travelers visited the ruins of Alamut, they spoke of smelling the faint perfume of strange herbs. They wanted the legend to be true, to believe that paradise could be manufactured, that faith could be lit like a match. It's easier, after all, to fear what we don't understand if we can turn it into a story, and so the West carried that story home. From it came a new word, a new archetype, a new association between smoke and sin, between the East and mystery. Hashish, once the companion of poets and mystics, was reborn as the substance of shadows. The real fortress of Alamut would fall to the Mongols in 1256. Its library burned, its people scattered, but the myth survived, stronger than stone. It traveled across languages and centuries, reshaping history with a single misinterpreted word. And somewhere, perhaps, that amused the Sufis, the very ones who saw divine truth hidden in contradiction. For what is myth, after all, but smoke given shape? As the last light fades behind the mountains, you can almost see it rising, a wisp of memory where the fortress once stood, curling into the twilight, carrying no malice, only the echo of an old misunderstanding and the soft laughter of those who knew better. The mountains of Persia fade into the damp, grey hush of medieval Europe. The air grows colder, heavier. Gone are the open skies and desert winds. Here, the horizon is a line of black forests, stone monasteries, and fields that sleep half the year under frost. The old world of curiosity and devotion has narrowed into fear. In this Europe of the 12th and 13th centuries, every whisper of mystery carries danger. The church stands as both shepherd and sentinel, its cathedrals towering like mountains of judgment. Knowledge, once sacred, is now suspect, and smoke, especially unfamiliar smoke, begins to smell like sin. The word Hashish has already drifted west through the stories of crusaders, carried by monks, merchants, and soldiers who returned from the east with more rumor than truth. They speak of heretics who use strange herbs to see visions, of mystics who vanish into clouds of laughter, of Saracen sorcery that confuses the senses and tempts the soul. No one in the villages knows what hashish is. But fear is fertile soil, and so begins a new chapter in the plant's story, one of silence, suspicion, and shadows. In the damp cloisters of Benedictine monasteries, monks tend to their herb gardens with careful devotion. Rows of sage, rue, and wormwood grow under the watch of the abbey walls. Among them, hemp still thrives, tall and plain, its leaves brushing the edges of the stone. It has survived the centuries quietly, too useful to banish. The monks spin it into thread, twist it into rope, and press its seeds for oil to light the chapel lamps. But beyond the abbey gates, something darker stirs. In the forests and villages, far from the Latin prayers of the educated, the old pagan knowledge still flickers. Women, healers, midwives, herbalists, keep their gardens behind wooden fences, growing what their mothers taught them to grow. They know which roots ease childbirth, which leaves heal fever, and which smoke calms the restless mind. They call the plant hempenweed, or chanvra, or cannabina. They dry its flowers, steep its seeds in milk, or mix it with fat to make soothing salves. Their patients call them wise women, the priests call them something else. The church has begun to see in every whisper of healing a shadow of rebellion. Women who treat pain without permission are said to consort with devils. Those who make people laugh or dream are accused of witchcraft. And soon the scent of hemp smoke, once a mark of healing, becomes the smell of heresy. Imagine a winter night in a thatched cottage on the edge of the woods. A woman sits by the hearth, grinding dried leaves into a wooden bowl. Her patient, a farmer's wife in the throes of labor, moans softly beside her. The midwife stirs the mixture into warm milk, murmuring a prayer that's older than the church, older than Latin itself. The woman drinks, sighs, and the pain eases. Outside, the snow falls silently. Inside, there is only the crackle of fire and the faint, sweet scent of relief. But in the morning, someone will smell that same smoke, and instead of mercy, they'll smell evil. By the 14th century, hemp is still everywhere, in ropes, sails, parchment, and cloth. But its flower has become forbidden ground. The same plant that lights the monastery lamps is now in other forms said to light hell's fires. In sermons, priests speak of the herba diabolica, the devil's herb. They say it brings dreams of lust and illusions of flight, that it tempts women into trance, makes them speak false prophecies. And when the Inquisition begins to spread, so does the fear. A single plant now wears two faces, one woven into altar cloths, another burned in the hearths of the accused. In truth, most people still use hemp simply to survive. Farmers plant it beside flax, its fibers feeding the spinning wheels that clothe half of Europe. Its seeds go into porridge and feed livestock through the winter. Its oil burns clean in lamps, a small mercy in a world ruled by darkness. But its more mysterious uses, the old salves and teas, vanish from records, driven underground. And yet, even in this age of suspicion, the plant refuses to disappear completely. In manuscripts copied by monastic scribes, tucked between treatises on divine law and herbal medicine, appear quiet notes, cannabum, useful for swelling and heat of the joints. Seeds, when crushed, calm the humors and grant rest. The monks don't name it sin or salvation. They write it as they find it, a fact of nature, neither angel nor demon. Meanwhile, in the cities, alchemists begin to whisper of transmutation, of substances that can transform matter or the soul. Some burn hemp resin in their workshops, claiming the fumes sharpen thought and open hidden senses. They call it fumus philosophorum, the philosopher's smoke. They write about it in symbols, disguising it as allegory, a green dragon that devours the sun, a vine that sleeps until fire wakes it. They know better than to write plainly. In an age where knowledge itself can burn, allegory is armor. The peasants know nothing of allegory. They just know that sometimes, on cold nights, a little smoke helps the pain in their backs, makes sleep come easier. They don't think of devils, they think of warmth. But Europe has no patience for warmth. The plague will come soon, and with it, panic. People will look for blame, and always find it in the same place, in the woods, in the women, in the herbs. Hemp survives anyway. It always does. Too ordinary to notice, too essential to banish, it waits in the fields while history burns around it. It becomes the thread in the monk's robe, the rope on the ship that carries crusaders to their fates, the parchment for the Bible itself. Even in the shadow of fear, it stays loyal to the human story, useful, silent, enduring. And maybe that's the cruelest irony of all, that the same plant demonized as witchcraft held up the very structures of faith that condemned it. As the 15th century dawns, Europe begins to stir again, trade returns, art awakens, and beneath the surface of superstition, curiosity starts to flicker once more, small at first, like the spark of a lamp lit with hemp seed oil. The world doesn't know it yet, but the plant's time in the shadows is ending. Soon, it will re-emerge, not in whispers of heresy, but in the bright studios of scholars, painters, and explorers. For now, though, the smoke of the devil's herb drifts quietly through the cold air of medieval Europe, not curse, not miracle, just the steady breath of a plant that has learned how to wait. The bells of medieval Europe fall silent, and the world exhales for the first time in centuries. Here the smoke of fear begins to thin. It is the 15th century, and dawn returns to the Western world. Not a single sunrise, but a slow golden brightening across a landscape of ink, parchment, and rediscovery. This is the Renaissance, a word that means rebirth, but feels more like remembering. Painters, doctors, sailors, and dreamers begin to ask forbidden questions again. They dust off old texts that had slept for centuries in monastery vaults, crack them open, and breathe in the scent of knowledge that once belonged to Greece, Egypt, and the East. And among the forgotten pages, one plant quietly steps back into the light. In a small workshop in Venice, a physician named Antonio Musa Bresaola turns the fragile pages of Dioscorides de Materia Medica, a Roman herbal text over 1,000 years old. He traces the familiar lines, "Cannabis, when taken in drink, quenches desire, yet also eases pain of the joints." Bresaola frowns. The monks had copied this text for generations, but few remembered what it meant. Now surrounded by the hum of printing presses and the salt air of a city that trades with every corner of the known world, he begins to test it. He finds that hemp, long used for rope and cloth, also yields an oil of surprising potency. He distills it, infuses it with wine, and uses it to calm patients before surgery. It works. He writes about it cautiously, using Latin so precise it almost hides the wonder. The extract of cannabis, when prepared with care, brings sleep to the restless and rest to the pained. It is one of the earliest hints that Europe is ready to forgive the plant it once condemned. The invention of the printing press changes everything. Paper, once precious, becomes the foundation of a revolution, and that paper is often made from hemp. In the printing houses of Mainz, Cologne, and Amsterdam, bales of hemp fiber are pulped, pressed, and dried into sheets strong enough to carry ink across oceans of time. The first Bibles of Gutenberg are printed on it. So are the treatises of Copernicus and the sketches of Leonardo. Hemp becomes the body of rebirth itself, the skin on which civilization re-inks its memory. It is no longer the devil's weed. It is the page of salvation, of science, of imagination. In every library and merchant's chest, in every laboratory and ship's log, its presence is silent but absolute. In Florence, under frescoed ceilings that shimmer with light, painters grind pigments by hand. They use hemp seed oil as a binder, a secret ingredient that makes colors glow longer, deeper. The scent of it clings to their studios, faintly nutty, resinous, clean. The oil dries slowly, allowing them to layer light upon light, as if painting with time itself. Leonardo da Vinci, ever the alchemist of reality, experiments with it, writing notes in mirror script about the subtle nature of oils drawn from the seeds of cannabis. To him, it isn't medicine or mysticism, it's chemistry, the transformation of plant into permanence. Meanwhile, in hidden rooms, lit by candles, alchemists stir the air with glass rods and ambition. They no longer seek gold, but understanding. To them, hemp is an emblem of transformation. Green life turning into smoke, smoke into spirit, spirit into revelation. One alchemist writes, "The vapor of the herb brings forth a gentleness in thought and an ease in the movement of imagination." He doesn't know it, but he's describing something that would one day be called creativity. Outside the cities, the age of discovery begins to unfurl like a sail. And those sails, every single one, are made of hemp. From Lisbon to Bristol, shipyards echo with the rhythm of rope making. Workers twist long fibers into cables that can hold the breath of the wind itself. It takes 60 tons of hemp to rig a single vessel like Columbus's Santa Maria. Without it, no sail could rise, no mast could stand, no voyage could reach the horizon. Hemp becomes the material spine of expansion. It holds up the very idea of exploration. The irony is almost poetic. A plant once burned in fear of the devil, now powers ships carrying priests, soldiers, and dreamers to the ends of the earth, in search of God, glory, or proof that the world is round. In the apothecaries of Padua and Paris, glass jars line the shelves, filled with powdered herbs, crushed roots, and oils, labeled in careful script. Among them sits oleum cannabis, amber and fragrant. Physicians rediscover what the ancients already knew, that the oil soothes inflammation, eases the spasms of the stomach, quiets the nerves of the dying. It's prescribed for gout, for melancholy, for sleeplessness, and for the first time in centuries, no one whispers when they use it. In England, the herbalist John Gerard writes, in 1597, hemp seed eaten causeth a notable mirth, but with moderation, the juice thereof is good against the cramp. Notable mirth, a polite Renaissance way of saying, it makes one feel the world a little lighter. Even as Europe brightens with art and science, the Church still watches. But its hold has loosened, the Inquisition's fires are cooling, replaced by curiosity and quiet heresy, disguised as scholarship. The scholars of Salamanca debate Aristotle by candlelight, while pressing their ink onto hemp paper. They quote scripture and alchemy in the same breath. To question the universe is no longer treason, it is art. And somewhere between the lines of those treatises, cannabis becomes a symbol again, not of rebellion, but of humanity's persistence. A plant that endured through superstition and war, now woven into the very pages that redefine truth. Picture a night in Venice, the canals shimmer under the reflection of lanterns. A printer leans over his press, the smell of ink and hemp paper thick in the air. Above him, the stars glint faintly, the same stars sailors chase across oceans. He prints a new book by a young astronomer, a man named Galileo Galilei, who dares to suggest that the heavens move. The printer doesn't care about theology. He only knows the paper must hold, and it does. Somewhere else, a painter wipes his brush on a rag, soaked in hemp oil, leaving a smear of gold and green. A physician bottles a tincture, labeling it cannabis indica, because traders have begun bringing stronger varieties from India. A philosopher writes that knowledge, like smoke, must rise freely or suffocate. The air hums with invention, and through it all, invisible yet essential, the same plant that once bore curses now bears civilization itself. By the end of the Renaissance, hemp is no longer a story of sin or salvation. It is a fact of life, as common as bread, as vital as water. The ships that carry explorers, the paper that carries ideas, the oil that preserves paintings, all whisper its name. It has become what humanity itself is becoming: adaptable, curious, unbroken. And as the century turns, the smoke that once rose from temples and altars begins to rise again, not from fear, but from wonder. A sign that the world, at last, is learning how to breathe freely again. The Renaissance light spreads westward like spilled ink, and soon it meets wind. The 17th and 18th centuries are the age of sail, the era of wooden hulls and endless horizons, when the oceans become both battlefield and marketplace. Empires bloom and clash across salt water, and in their rigging, in their sails, in the very breath that moves them, there is one silent constant: hemp. The plant is no longer just useful, it is indispensable. Without it, no empire sails, no war is fought, no new world discovered. It is the green muscle of maritime power, the quiet engine of global ambition. In shipyards from Portsmouth to Amsterdam, from Lisbon to Stockholm, the air rings with the rhythm of hammers and creaking timbers. Men work knee-deep in tar and rope, twisting, spinning, coiling, a hypnotic dance that keeps the world moving. Each great warship, with its forests of masts and maze of rigging, consumes 60 to 80 tons of hemp. Its sails are hemp canvas, thick and sun-bleached. Its ropes hemp fiber soaked in pine tar. Even its maps, its logs, its sailors' wages, printed, written and counted on hemp paper. Every voyage, every cannon fired in the name of king or commerce, depends on this humble plant. When the English Navy begins its rise, hemp becomes strategic material, as vital as gunpowder. Admirals petition Parliament for supply. Shortages are treated like military crises. Without hemp, the Royal Navy cannot rule the seas. Without the seas, Britain cannot rule at all. Most of Europe's hemp comes from the cold, flat expanses of Russia, Poland, and the Baltic states. In these northern fields, the plant grows tall and pale beneath endless grey skies, rippling like grain. Peasants harvest it by hand, stripping stalks, beating them, soaking them in rivers until the fibers soften. The smell of wet hemp, sharp, grassy, clean, fills the air. Whole villages depend on it. For the teasers of Russia, hemp is wealth. They trade it in massive bales to the British Empire, the Dutch Republic, and even the early Americans. The port of Riga becomes the heart of a green economy. Ships arrive empty and leave heavy with rope and sailcloth. The English call it Riga hemp, and they guard it like gold. So essential is the trade that wars will later be fought to control it. When Napoleon blockades the Baltic to starve Britain of hemp, the Royal Navy scrambles to find new sources. The empire's arteries are green and fibrous. Every rope that snaps is a threat to its heartbeat. While Europe fights for supply, the colonies provide new soil. In the Americas, hemp takes root almost as soon as settlers arrive. Jamestown, 1619. The Virginia Assembly passes a law requiring every farmer to grow hemp. It is the colony's lifeline, used for cloth, rope, and paper, in a land still carving itself out of wilderness. The plant thrives in the humid soil. Its fibers clothe farmers, patch sails, tie up livestock, and fill warehouses bound for London. Even George Washington will one day write in his diary, "Make the most of the Indian hemp seed and sow it everywhere." But this is not the gentle plant of the ancients anymore. It now grows in the shadow of empire, harvested by indentured servants and enslaved laborers, its profits feeding ships that return across the Atlantic, heavy with more human cargo. The same fibers that once bound sails now bind wrists. A plant that once symbolized peace becomes another instrument of expansion and exploitation. Yet, amid the toil and discipline of the age of sail, hemp still carries its quieter gift. Smoke, sailors, soldiers, and travelers across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East bring with them new customs, new words, new blends of culture. From India and the Arab world comes ganja, charas, and hashish, forms of the same plant prepared for smoke and reflection. Where the empires conquer, the plant follows, not as a commodity, but as a companion. On long voyages, sailors burn hemp rope fibers mixed with tobacco to ease the stench of the sea and the ache of solitude. In Caribbean ports, dock workers share rolled leaves in clay pipes, laughing in half a dozen languages. In African colonies, soldiers watch locals burn a strange herb that makes them sing through the night, and inevitably, they join in. This is the plant's quiet rebellion, while empires use it for control. It teaches the controlled how to breathe freely. Back in Europe, curiosity reignites. Natural philosophers, the early scientists, begin to classify the world with obsessive precision. They gather specimens from the colonies and label them Cannabis, sativa, Cannabis indica. Drawings of its serrated leaves and fibrous stalks fill the new encyclopedias of the Enlightenment. Some study its psychoactive resin, noting its strange effect on the mind. In 1753, Carl Linnaeus officially names and categorizes the plant. His student Jean-Baptiste Lamarck describes a variety from India that produces a more potent resin used by the natives for pleasure and devotion. For the first time, science acknowledges what priests once called sorcery, the plant's power to alter perception. But Europe, ever practical, is not ready to explore its mysteries yet. Hemp remains, above all, a machine part, fiber for empire. Its spirit waits, patient, inside its resin, while men of science chart the visible world. By the late 18th century, hemp's reach is planetary. From the Russian fields to the Caribbean plantations, from Bengal to Boston, its fibers weave the fabric of globalization. It sails with Cook to the Pacific, lines the uniforms of the British East India Company, and ropes the anchors of ships that circle the Cape of Good Hope. Everywhere the empire expands, hemp follows, its seeds scattered by wind, war, and trade. It becomes invisible through ubiquity. No one praises it, no one fears it. It simply is, the quiet sinew of civilization, and yet, its shadow form, the smoke that once rose from Scythian tents and Sufi gatherings, keeps flickering in hidden corners, the dock, the barracks, the port tavern, the colonial marketplace. There the old knowledge survives, that the same plant that moves ships can also move souls. But the wind is changing. Steam will soon replace sail, coal will replace rope, and empire will find new engines. The age of hemp, the green age of fiber and wind, is nearing its end. On the Thames, shipwrights watch the first ironclads glide across the water. Their ropes are still hemp, their sails still canvas, but their hearts are steel. Smoke now rises, not from the plant, but from furnaces. The world is trading breath for fire. Yet even as hemp loses its empire to iron, it keeps its deeper power, the ability to return, to reinvent, to remind. For though the sails will be lowered and the fields repurposed, the plant has never truly belonged to kings. It belongs to the wind. And the wind, as always, moves where it pleases. The sails of empire have carried hemp across the world, as rope, as fiber, as oil. But the winds of the 18th and 19th centuries do something more. They carry its spirit. For centuries, the plant served silently, turning millstones, binding ships, lighting lamps. Now, as empire reaches its height, something older awakens within it. The smoke returns. The forgotten breath of ancient ritual finds its way back into the world, this time through the chaos of colonial trade. In the holds of British and Dutch ships, hemp seed traveled not as contraband, but as cargo, sacks marked fiber stock or seed grain. Sailors carried it unknowingly to new continents, India, Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas. Wherever the empire planted itself, hemp sprouted, adapting, transforming, surviving. But in India, the plant was already waiting. Long before the East India Company, it had lived in the songs of sadhus, the cups of bhang, the rituals of Shiva. The British, fascinated yet wary, called it Indian hemp. They recorded its uses in colonial ledgers, half with curiosity, half with suspicion. In 1798, the governor of Bengal commissioned one of the first European studies on the drug. The report read, "The natives prepare from the plant 3 forms, bhang, ganja, and charas, all esteemed for their power to make men cheerful." The word ganja, soft and rhythmic, would soon echo across oceans. When Britain outlawed the slave trade in the early 1800s, it replaced slavery with indenture, a quieter cruelty. Ships now carried thousands of Indian laborers to plantations in the Caribbean, Africa, and the Pacific. Each laborer was allowed a small bundle of belongings, Some carried seeds. They planted them in foreign soil. Guyana, Jamaica, Trinidad, Mauritius, South Africa. And when the leaves grew tall, they rolled them in scraps of paper or hollow reeds. They lit them in the evening, after backbreaking work, the smoke curling above the cane fields like a prayer from another world. That was how ganja came to the West Indies, not as commodity, but as comfort. A way to breathe after the day's exhaustion, a whisper of home in a land of exile. The overseers called it Indian smoke. The enslaved called it medicine for the soul. Over time, the plant crossed lines, from Indian barracks to African villages, from sugar estates to city slums. It mingled with other herbs, other languages, other faiths. In the Caribbean, it met Congo spirituality, obeah and mile, and found new meaning. It became a ritual of resistance, a sacred ordinary act, a way to reclaim an evening, a breath, a fragment of peace. In South Africa, Indian workers brought dagga, the local wild cannabis, into new ritual blends. Zulu warriors, miners, and farmers smoked it in long clay pipes. They believed it sharpened courage, opened memory, connected the living to ancestors. Colonial officers tried to suppress it, but the plant thrived in secret. In port towns and mining camps, ganja became currency, traded for food, tobacco, stories. It traveled inland, carried by caravans and workers, merging with indigenous customs, until no one remembered exactly where it had begun. It was no longer Indian, no longer African. It was both, and everyone's. Back in London, the empire's doctors were discovering what the empire's workers already knew. In 1839, an Irish physician named William Brooke O'Shaughnessy, working for the British East India Company, published his research on cannabis in the Transactions of the Medical and Physical Society of Bengal. He described its use among Indian healers for pain, epilepsy, and muscle spasms. He wrote, astonished, of all narcotics, the hemp plant is the most harmless and perhaps the most valuable. When he returned to England, he brought samples, thick, dark resin sealed in glass. He tested it on patients in Calcutta and London, children with seizures, soldiers with wounds, the dying in agony. Each time the same result: peace, stillness, sleep. O'Shaughnessy's work transformed cannabis from superstition to science. By the mid-1800s, it appeared in British pharmacopoeias as Extractum Cannabis Indicae, an official medicine. Pharmaceutical companies began producing tinctures and elixirs labeled Indian hemp compound. It was prescribed for migraines, insomnia, cholera, and melancholy. Queen Victoria herself reportedly used it for menstrual pain. What the empire had dismissed as native indulgence, it now bottled and sold under Latin names. In the colonies, meanwhile, ganja became more than medicine. It became symbol. In Jamaica, it spread among the poor and the maroon communities, descendants of escaped slaves who built free settlements in the mountains. They saw in the plant something deeply spiritual, a bridge between the living and the divine. It was burned at gatherings, shared during song, passed as a sign of equality. By the late 19th century, colonial governments were alarmed. Reports described coolies and Negroes meeting at night to smoke intoxicating weed, singing and laughing without fear of authority. In Trinidad, laws were passed to control its sale. In Mauritius, it was taxed heavily. In South Africa, banned outright. But prohibition only deepened its power. The smoke became defiance, a small glowing act of freedom. Sailors carried it from the ports of Calcutta and Kingston to the harbors of New Orleans, Cape Town, and Rio de Janeiro. By the late 1800s, cannabis was global again, moving not through priests or philosophers, but through workers, migrants, and wanderers. In the Caribbean, its name settled into the language of Creole and Patois, ganja, kaya, herb. In Africa, it became dagga, Igbo, Lyamba, each word a local echo of a global breath. In every port city of empire, there was a smell that didn't belong to kings. The earthy sweetness of smoke rising from hidden corners, from men and women who owned nothing but time. The same smoke that once drifted through Scythian tents and Sufi gatherings, now floated above cane fields and mining camps, whispering the same truth across centuries. The body may be owned, but breath cannot. By 1900, the British Empire covered a quarter of the earth. Its flags and laws reached from Canada to Cape Town, from India to Australia, and yet beneath that veneer of order, the plant it had carried everywhere was quietly undoing the very boundaries it imposed. It connected the colonized through ritual and song, defying distance and difference. Indian, African, Creole, and Arab all breathed the same smoke, sang the same refrains. Out of those mingled breaths would come a new spiritual rhythm, one that would later be called Rastafari, one that would turn ganja into gospel. But that's still to come. For now, the 19th century ends the way it began. Ships creaking in harbors, fields waving in the wind, and somewhere, from Kingston to Durban, from Bombay to Port of Spain, a curl of green-grey smoke rising into the tropical air. No flag claims it, no empire owns it. It belongs to the earth and the people who remember how to breathe. The century turns. The empires begin to creak. In the Caribbean, the sugar estates are quieting, their wealth fading, their overseers gone. But something else is growing in the soil they left behind. A green defiance, a spiritual rhythm, a flame that smolders in music, prayer, and smoke. This is the birth of Rastafari, the faith of the forgotten. A movement born not in temples or palaces, but in the hearts of the poor, the descendants of Africa, scattered by slavery, searching for a way back home through spirit, through sound, through the breath of the earth itself. And at the center of that rebirth stands the herb ganja, kaya, the healing of the nations. By the early 20th century, Jamaica is still under British rule, the island's wealth drained, its people caught between poverty and the false promises of progress. Plantation labor has replaced slavery, but hunger and inequality remain. Yet in the hills above Kingston, something new stirs, a blending of old roots and new revelation. Out of the Bible and the memory of Africa comes a voice, Marcus Garvey. He preaches unity, dignity, return. Look to Africa, he says, for the crowning of a black king. His words ignite a spark that leaps across the ocean. In 1930, that prophecy seems fulfilled when Rastafari Makonnen is crowned Emperor of Ethiopia, Haile Selassie I, the King of Kings. To the poor in Jamaica, this is no coincidence. It is destiny. They see in Selassie not a man but a living link to Zion, the real African homeland from which their ancestors were torn. A new religion takes his name, Rastafari, and in the smoke of ganja, they find their sacrament. The Rastas gather in the hills, away from colonial eyes. They build tabernacles of wood and zinc, circle fires at night, and speak of Babylon, the corrupt world of empire and greed, and Zion, the land of freedom and truth. In their reasoning sessions, they pass the chalice, a large ornate pipe, often carved from calabash and coconut shell, filled with the sacred herb. They light it, not in indulgence, but in reverence. The first puff is offered to Jai, the divine breath. Smoke rises, slow and spiraling, and voices begin to hum psalms, drums keeping time, like the heartbeat of the earth. They call it reasoning, a ritual of unity and reflection. As the chalice passes, words soften, laughter comes easier, understanding deepens. The smoke, they say, brings I and I closer to Jai. It is not escape, it is connection, it is memory returned to body. One elder explains it simply. The herb open up the eye. When I burn it, I feel the word come alive inside me. This is the old truth reborn, the Scythian hotbox, the Sufi dika, the Taoist breath, but now sung in patois, in drumbeat, in resistance. The same smoke, the same search for unity, but this time it belongs to the people who were never meant to have anything. The British authorities see it differently. To them, ganja is subversion, a threat to order, a symbol of disobedience among the black poor. They call it madness, filth, contagion. Police raid Rasta camps, burn fields, jail anyone found with a pipe or a leaf. In newspapers, the herb is demonized as the weed of violence, blamed for rebellion and unrest. They say it makes men lazy, makes women wild, makes labor unreliable. They cannot understand that the herb is not the cause of resistance. It is the language of it. When Rastas light their chalices, they are lighting history itself. They are burning centuries of silence. They are reclaiming breath. As the decades pass, Jamaica begins to find its voice, and that voice has a backbeat. The spiritual chants of Rastafari merge with mento and ska, then with the deep pulse of Nyabinghi drums. The rhythm travels from hillsides to studios, from reasoning circles to record grooves, and when it finally reaches the world, it carries the smoke with it. By the 1960s and 70s, reggae becomes the gospel of the poor turned universal, and at its heart stands Bob Marley, prophet, poet, bridge between worlds. In his hands, ganja becomes more than symbol. It becomes a sacrament of sound, the medium through which message and melody merge. When he sings, "Excuse me while I light my spliff, good God, I gotta take a lift," it is both prayer and protest. When he sings, "Herb is the healing of the nations," he's quoting the Bible, Revelation 22:2. The herb in Rasta cosmology is not sin but sanctity, the green key to collective peace. To Rastafari, ganja represents wisdom, the fire of inspiration, unity, shared breath among equals, healing, the balancing of body and spirit, freedom, the mind unchained from Babylon. It is nature's reminder that the divine is not distant. It grows underfoot. By the mid-20th century, governments across the world, still echoing colonial fears, outlaw cannabis entirely. The United States leads with its Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, spreading hysteria through propaganda films and moral panic. In Jamaica, the laws remain harsh. In Africa, similar bans follow. But the more they repress it, the more powerful it becomes in symbol. To smoke ganja becomes to defy empire, to remember what Babylon once forgotten, that the earth still belongs to its children. Rastafari spreads, first through music, then through migration, to London, New York, Toronto, and beyond. Everywhere it goes, it carries that scent of defiance and devotion. It teaches those who listen that liberation begins not with war, but with consciousness, with breathing the same air, together, without fear. By the late 20th century, the world changes again. What was once crime becomes medicine once more. Doctors begin to study cannabinoids. Activists push for decriminalization. The cycle closes. Science rediscovers what shamans, monks, and Rastas already knew, that the plant heals body and mind alike. In Jamaica, elders smile when asked about legalization. They've heard every argument before. One says, "Them lock up I for smoke, now them sell it in pharmacy." Babylon always late, but the herb they know was never waiting for permission. It has been part of the human breath since the first spark of fire. And now, as the planet spins toward new uncertainties, climate, empire, technology, its message remains the same: slow down, breathe, listen. The story that began with a Chinese emperor and a handful of seeds ends here, not in a laboratory, not in a battlefield, but in a song, a rhythm that carries the memory of tents and temples, of deserts and drums, of wisdom passed hand to hand through smoke. On a hillside in Jamaica, as the sun dips low and the drums begin to speak, a Rasta lights the chalice and passes it to his brethren. The smoke rises, glowing gold in the last light. Children laugh nearby. Someone hums redemption song. The wind takes the smoke and carries it far, over forests, over oceans, over centuries, and if you follow it closely enough, you can trace it back to the Scythian Hotbox, to Shiva's cup, to Taoist breath, to Egyptian mercy, to Persian flame, to the ship's rope, to the field, to the heart. The plant unchanged, only the hands that hold it different. The smoke fades into twilight, as it always does, but the story, the green thread that binds humanity's search for peace, still glows in the dark, a quiet ember that never dies. Herb is the healing of the nations. Revelation 22. From the first spark in an ancient tent to the chalice smoke rising over modern hills, the story of cannabis has always been the story of us, our pain, our healing, our endless reach for balance and belonging. Through empires and ashes, it remained what we too often forget to be: patient, generous, alive. The same plant that lit temples and powered ships now reminds a new generation to slow down, breathe deeply, and remember that peace is a seed, not a destination, but a practice. If this journey moved you, subscribe to Candlelit History, where forgotten worlds still breathe, one story at a time. Like, share, and stay close to the fire, because history, like smoke, is best when it's shared.